allegiance and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just for roll call, please, we have Vice Chair Rodriguez, Commissioner Pierce, and Commissioner Pat Lowe. Valerie Eglund has not arrived yet. We have 3 of 5 commissioners. That represents a quorum. Mm-hmm. Oh, and excuse me, our chairman is, did you care to speak to that, Vice Chair Rodriguez, on why our chairman is not here at the moment?
Our chairman got a stroke, and my understanding, and also a heart attack, and is on rehab, so we don't know how long he's going to be out.
Yeah, I would say that's an excused absence.
Yeah, that's excusable absence. Yes.
Okay. Right, so,
any commissioners, any announcements? No announcements?
I have a question, though, since it's on that. I believe sometime back we were going to always have on the agenda an item on general plan updates. Anyone else recollect that, or am I just getting old?
No, that was...
There was always going to be an open item on the agenda continuing forever.
Yes.
That, if I
that
may,
was on the old...
If I may, that's a great segue into staff announcements. Where
okay, so, well, before we move forward, so as long as staff understands that this is an item that should be on the agenda from here till the end of time, then great. Otherwise, I can make a motion again.
No, because it's not on the agenda.
Under, like,
public comment,
commissioners' comments? No, that won't work? Okay, well, as long as you get it.
I understand the request for a discussion item on the general plan
Yeah.
implementation.
And this project's one of the best reasons for something like that to be on there.
If I may, Chair Rodriguez, staff announcements is we are planning to bring before you in October here a discussion, a presentation of a workshop of a component of implementing the general plan with the highway commercial nodes along 101. There has been a reimbursement agreement signed for accessory planning staff. The EMC group was hired, and property owners from four separate nodes on the Highway 101 have contributed to funding that effort to create the implementation components for, I think it's regional commercial, which was a new designation from the general plan. How do we do that? And so they'll be bringing a presentation before the Planning Commission to make sure that it's kind of in keeping with the spirit or the direction from the county. And we're planning on that in October. And following that, in November or December, we also do have an application pending right now, actually to be processed, for a specific plan proposal. And this is formerly I always mix up Lima and Lico, but the large property south of Ridgemark and north of the Granite Rock Quarry. There's a proposal for a specific plan in that area. And it would be good to, on staff level, not only have some workshops and vet ideas from this draft specific plan, but to make sure that the Planning Commission is informed and the community is informed, and that as the plan, at the foundation of this plan starting, that it's in keeping with direction or guidance from the Planning Commission. So that's the intent. And so that, in a way, specific plans are fully meant to implement elements of the general plan. We really can't separate it from being too different from what you're requesting with our monthly return. May I note for the record that Commissioner Valerie Eglund has arrived. We have 4 commissioners. Thank you.
The owner of that land that you're talking about, the specific plan, do you have the name?
Lima.
Lima.
That's the 1,400 units?
Right, and we have the Richland communities represented by Mr. Brian Hardy, who's has very much of a development in mind there. but prior to presenting subdivision maps and things like that, he wants to have a specific plan. But a specific plan, by design, is a zoning element, and it represents supposed to represent a county position, not necessarily just solely a project. So without getting into the merits of that, we hope to bring that following October in November or December. If it goes to December, in November, we'll have the open discussion on general plan, and maybe I can help give a little framework to that. But on another note, if I could, and this is related, this is staff announcements. I did notice in November that our Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And that might be hard for some folks. So the preceding Wednesday is the 15th. And the December meeting is presently to 12/19. So I'm wondering if the Planning Commission wanted to entertain an adjustment forward on the November meeting by 1 week, and I'd have to see if the chambers are available and clear like that. Or maybe just due to workload or your preferences, if the November meeting is moved a little later, like early December, and we kind of combine the December meeting, so we just have one meeting between the 2 months. So I don't necessarily need to find out about December right now, but we should plan on what we want to do in November. If the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is acceptable as scheduled right now, let's just go with it. Or if majority of the board wishes to
So
change
question
that.
through the chair. So how many backlog projects do we have?
How many backlog projects?
Yeah,
There are
and-
many things in process. Not too many are ripe for bringing to the commission right now. Might be a great time to have some of these discussions for general plan.
Okay. Well, I'm more worried about, we knew the job was dangerous when we signed up for it, right? So, and this stuff happens, and it's inconvenient at best. So I'm more interested to see just how much of a demand there is and need there is for us to be fulfilling our commitment to the community and the applicants. So if we do not have a lot of stuff ganged up, then I'm okay with whatever they decide.
We just went through 2 cancellations, right, for not having items that were that ripe for your decision. So was that for kind of keeping the target on the 19th, the Wednesday before? That'll keep me from driving to LA.
I'm okay with
Might
it.
not be too bad.
November, you said?
November, yeah.
Yeah,
before
November.
Thanksgiving.
That'll be the 21st?
Yeah, it's the Wednesday before the Thursday Thanksgiving.
Thursday's on the 22nd. That's Thanksgiving. So it'd be
Oh, it's the
21st.
22nd, no. I think it was the 29th.
Then I don't have to cook.
Okay, so the Wednesday preceding the 21st is the 14th. My apologies. I think I got caught up with the December calendar. Nope, I was just incorrect. So the question is, would you like to move it to the Wednesday before on the 14th, and we'll find out calendar availability, or we'll keep it as per the schedule we adopted earlier in the year, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving?
Whatever you guys prefer, it don't matter to me.
Well, Mr. Chair, I thought when we set the calendar that we set the December meeting for the first Wednesday in December. Remember, we had quite a discussion on it, and I thought that's already been done.
Well, so the November one moved to the 1st, and then we had no additional meeting in December?
In December, right.
Just December 1st?
We had quite a discussion on it. I thought that's what was set, but maybe not. I don't know if anybody else remembers.
I don't remember.
I don't remember, no.
And
It
the
wasn't
first
at that
meeting in
meeting.
December being, well, that was actually one of the options I put on the table. So, hey, boy, how brilliant I was if I'm just repeating where you've already been. So one meeting on December 5th, the first Wednesday of December, versus one in November and one in December.
And I think
and
we were
one
going
on the
to-
third Wednesday.
What I remember was we were going to reevaluate, like around this time, to see if there were quite a few projects and to see if we could make it happen or not.
It's
So
your
you're
ple-
saying it was combined for early December?
Right. the November meeting and then the December meeting and have it early in the month rather than the week before Christmas. If everyone's all right with that, I can make a
That's-
motion if we need to.
There will only be 19 shopping days left in front. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, and I think we need a motion for record.
Okay, I will move then that we change the November, combine the November and December meeting to December 5th, if the room is available.
I second that.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. I have no further staff announcements at this time.
Okay, public comment. If anybody wants to speak on the something's not on the agenda can come up now. Just state your name, get a speaker card. So public comment is open. Anybody? No? Okay, public comment is closed. Consent agenda. Acknowledge a public hearing. Acknowledgement of certificate of posting.
I filled out a speaker card, but it's to an item that's already on the agenda. So is that, do I get to speak then?
When the agenda, the item comes up, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Minutes, everybody for the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Pierce?
Aye.
Okay.
There's a couple of errors in the minutes. So I'd like to pull those, and I'll go with the second on your consent.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar, pulling the minutes.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Document basically says, or maybe it's actually in the staff report, it says that basically planning staff directed county staff to facilitate meetings and stuff with the city and go to other elements. Basically, we just sort of listened to Tavin tell us he was going to do that. So we were just kind of like following his observance more than directing and agreeing with him. So I just wanted to do a clarification on that. And with that, I'll move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay, we're going to leave the discussion item and go to public hearing. Item number 3. TSM 17-104 tentative subdivision map.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair,
We're going to go to item number 3, and we'll come back to discussion. Item number 2.
Okay.
Is that okay?
just unexpected, but thank you. You're chairman.
And that was carried on from what, July? Presentation.
Sir, can you specify your item 1 and 2, because I'm trying to follow this in the copy I have. So for some of us
On the
here-
public hearing, number 3. It's real clear. A bold 3 number there on your left-hand side. Quarter of a page down. On page 2.
I'm going. I'll be back. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir.
Are we ready?
Yep, we're ready.
All right. Good evening. Thank you, Vice Chair Rodriguez and fellow commissioners. We join before you this evening to hear evidence and weigh criteria. That's hear evidence and weigh criteria in considering TSM 17-104, also known as Spring Meadow Estates, a tentative subdivision map proposed by applicants and owner Mr. Stotler and Ms. Williams. So Elizabeth Ann Williams filed an application to subdivide a 21-acre parcel under her ownership at 1735 Santa Ana Road on July 10th, 2017. And tentative subdivision map 17-104 proposes to subdivide the property that you see here into 20 parcels of approximately 1.0 acres each. 4 of those parcels are 1.2 acres approximately large. The subject parcel is on the south side of Santa Ana Road, west of Fairview, but east of Airline Highway. And we can take a good look at that map right here, as you can see. So this is the 20-acre parcel. Santa Ana runs this way, and Fairview, of course, is over here. Santa Ana functions as a collector road, bringing all these residential areas on the cul-de-sacs, the dead ends all up and down the way, onto Santa Ana, and then it feeds into the arterials of Fairview and Highway 25, but also functions as a conduit between the two, so it's got kind of a dual function as a roadway. So county staff had distributed this plan to the responsible agencies and departments for their review and comment. And this parcel has a general plan designation, as we've seen, I think, of residential mixed, and a zoning designation of rural residential. The project is also located within the sphere of influence, which has some implications for the applicable rules under which we must operate and conduct our analysis. And we're bound by those and by the evidence before us today. So, in addition, Land Use Policy 9.6, city-county coordination, is really useful in understanding what some of our obligations are as we coordinate our efforts to plan in a coherent and orderly fashion, subject only to county's power and decision-making process. I think there's been some, not registering an opinion here, but rather it's been said that the county has deferred to the city and given up its power, and that's not really the case. The general plan was developed in accordance with prevailing a law. Your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, and your guys have all devoted, a great deal of work and much time and sweat, and I won't say blood and tears, but maybe tears might be applicable, to develop a general plan, and that's the county's decision. The county has the power to do that, and they did. In any case, I want to go over a little bit of the background here. On June 13th, staff met with the City of Hollister staff to get a verbal take on some of their responses. And on June 15th, we received written, substantive, and substantial concerns from the City of Hollister, demonstrating inconsistencies with the city's general plan within the sphere of influence. And again, it's critical to note that throughout the general plan, for every policy, every tool, every method, there's a purpose behind that. To coordinate projects and standards with the City of Hollister, so that we're working directly with them to arrive at mutually agreeable processes, basically, and standards, and to develop in a coherent and orderly manner. But this last bullet is really critical to developing at the density that we're finding ourselves in the position of acknowledging, or recognizing, and that is to preserve agricultural land, to maximize the efficient use of infrastructure, and to preserve natural habitat. And without adhering to other provisions in the plan about compact development and being everybody on the same page, it's really difficult to meet all three of those. This is a 20-acre parcel, and it's one decision. So,
What's some of the other background, the other steps that have
absolutely.
taken place?
So what we've got is so in the process we you'll excuse me a moment. On June 20th, staff requested, and the commission did continue the matter to July 18th. Planning Commission hearing due to the substantial and substantive concerns raised, and the concerns are of both county and city staff. And essentially, we basically just needed to assess those in a methodical manner so that we could provide accurate and useful information and analysis to the Planning Commission for your discretionary consideration. And on July 18th, the Planning Commission convened and heard evidence and weighed criteria in considering this proposal. Hearing that, Land Use Policy 9.8, Sewer and Water Service Commitments, states that the county shall require new development within the spheres of influence of Hollister or San Juan Bautista to obtain water and sewer service commitments from either of the cities or whichever districts are applicable prior to project approval. And also we heard that the memorandum of understanding for the Hollister Urban Area Water and Wastewater Master Plan, and that is quite a mouthful, states in recital 2.2.4 that within the Hollister urban area, all wastewater shall be treated. That's fairly binding, shall be treated at a central wastewater treatment plant, and the city and county general plans and supporting public service plans and implementing zoning regulations shall be consistent with that requirement. And, that's a memorandum of a legal memorandum of understanding between the city, the county, and the San Benito County Water District, and Sunny Slope is a signatory as well. So that was presented, and on July 18th, after deliberating, the Planning Commission continued the matter and directed staff to convene a meeting to move both the applicant and the city toward mutual agreement and toward approval by increasing the project's consistency with the general plan. So we did convene a meeting and attempt to do more than one. We discussed with the applicant and city staff, I believe on June 7th, what measures both the city and the applicant could take to increase their consistency with the general plan so that we could bring an approvable project before you today. And what we found was that during that meeting, neither the city nor the applicant's representatives were willing to take required measures to come into conformance or into consistency with some of the clear measures that we've got before us.
Mr. Felsing, if I could jump in and elaborate on that meeting a little bit. So with the direction given by the Planning Commission with the continuance to go work on this, go sit with the city, bring the applicant, bring the city together, bring county staff together, we did that. We scheduled a meeting as people could become available and huddled in their council chambers, a good maybe 15 people at the table with the applicant there. And the applicant and county and city staff were all in discussion, and some of the main discussion items, and this is enumerated in your resolution, were what are some of the options. And one of the options presented by the applicant was, since I'm trying to get a letter of service commitment from the sewer provider, but they don't appear to be ready yet to provide sewer, what if I offer a dry pipe of sewer pipe in my subdivision, and we'll still continue with septic, but by the time the sewer gets here, we'll try to find a way to obligate the new residents to connect to that sewer line. One of the other discussions items offered by the applicant was offering up some condition language that would be a deed restriction on each of the parcels, so that buyer beware is, while you have a septic system on your property now, when the city sewer gets here, you'll be obligated to connect to it. And by the way, there's a dry pipe in the road. And one of the other things discussed too, so these are discussion items. One of the other things discussed too, trying to get that letter of commitment, was that the property owners who then do connect to the sewer system would be obligated to deconstruct and clean or dismantle their septic systems. That was one of the options being discussed by all these parties at the table. One of the other items discussed was, was for the developer to provide for the pipe and the physical connection back to the city's endpoint on their existing sewer system way to the west. I forget if we have that measurement, but it's quite a few properties to the west. So those items were discussed. The applicant didn't go with that fourth item, like a willingness to pay for the pipe, but they did revise plans to show a dry pipe in their subdivision with the stubs to each property, and they would like to offer language for the deed restrictions, or at least the buyer beware, to connect later and to be responsible for deconstructing their septic systems. And these were offered in that collaborative effort that you directed us to go work on this program with. So this was offered by the applicant in hopes of obtaining a letter of service commitment from the sewer provider. It wasn't enough for the city to offer that letter, and we do not have that letter of commitment of service. So I can probably return it to you, Mr. Felsing, but where you did see on the screen just a moment ago words like encourage and work with, we're really bound by number 9.8 in our county general plan, which has some very strong words in black and white. The county shall require new development within the spheres of influence of Hollister to obtain sewer and water service commitments from the city prior to project approval. And with that in black and white from our planning and policy document, we as technicians are not policy creators, nor we're not supposed to make stuff up. We're supposed to report to you what the code says and how the projects evaluate. And we have no choice other than to recommend a denial here, because it is this project right now without a commitment of service, where our own general plan does defer this strong language to the city. Mm-hmm. And so we're obligated with the way it's written to come forward with our recommendation of denial. And as you break that into subdivision findings, there's, any one of 9 criteria can disqualify make it more difficult for a subdivision to be approved. But the number one item is this project consistent with the general plan. We've got about 7 points of evidence in that resolution showing how this project is inconsistent. And it's more than just even the sewer, but that's the big one with the hardest language. Compounded with that is the language of this memorandum of understanding on the Hollister urban area, where the city of Hollister, the San Benito County Water District, and the county of County of San Benito entered into this agreement for great reasons: protect groundwater, treat septic and treat the sewage property, provide blends of water that work for agriculture. The auspices behind Hollister urban area and sewer service and the water service are great, but yet there's language in that memorandum that says in this Hollister urban area, all sewage shall be treated at the plant. So I hope I didn't steal too much of your thunder, but I just really wanted to demonstrate that we followed the county direction and made multiple efforts and brought folks together to talk. And the applicant was not able to mature the proposal to a degree that they could render a letter of service commitment from the city of Hollister. And because of the strong language in the general plan That's our obligation as staff to recommend denial. I don't know really how, at this point, one would be, it's a general plan policy. We can't pick and choose which ones to enforce and which not. We have to enforce them all. So, Mr. Felsing, if there's a point where you can jump back in, that was
Sure.
quite a segue on my part, but I just really want to demonstrate that, many parties moved together with the Planning Commission's direction to try to find that way, and we didn't get there. We didn't, we were directed to work with the city and work with the, but we can't direct the city. You shall give us a letter of commitment, so thank you.
Thank you. That was just a perfect jumping in point. And, we had worked, and urged some movement on both sides and weren't able to get, movement on key points that would have brought us into conformance. Section 23.07.006, includes the Planning Commission's basis for approving or denying, as you all know, a tentative subdivision map. One would either have to find consistent in its entirety for approval, or any one of those 9, as I'm sure you're well aware, any one of those 9 provisions could result in denial if it were found to be inconsistent. So it'll interesting to see how that flows. In any case, I want to touch on a couple of key points. One is Land Use Policy 9.8, sewer and water service. The county shall require new development. To obtain these commitments for services prior to project approval, we know that, but I just wanted to emphasize that it is not the only one. It's just one of the key ones, often the main and only key one, but the rest of them, matter as well. So LU 9.3, within the sphere of influence, the county shall coordinate with the city on all planning and permit approvals. And this is a county policy. The county decision makers made this policy and no one else. And where appropriate, I thought this was interesting, and where appropriate, require a concurrent application for any general plan amendment on property within the spheres that, enable a project to move forward. And that could be useful to an applicant who finds himself in an awkward position. Land Use Policy 9.6, the county shall continue to cooperate to promote cooperative planning of city fringe areas just like this one, to reduce this kind of fractured boundary lines in the case of annexation, and identify mutual beneficial solutions. Again, I'm sure this isn't news, but nonetheless, it's key to understanding where we are obliged and obligated to look at and assess this proposal.
Mr. Felsing,
Yes,
if
sir.
I could jump in and enhance the presentation again as well. So we also asked ourselves, and also the applicant had a query, of what are the subdivisions dating back to 2013 that have been, what are the developments in the Hollister urban area and or city of Hollister sphere of influence dating back to 2013 that have been reviewed or approved by the county. And so, Mr. Fox, if you could roll that one map out that you and I made this evening. So what we looked back to 2016, I looked at the projects for minor subdivision, tentative maps, and what's interesting is several of these tentative maps do have Santa Ana Valley Road addresses. They do. But they're the north side of Santa Ana Valley Road, and Santa Ana Valley Road is the sphere of influence, and so they were fully county projects, because it's only the south of Santa Ana Road that these other general plan policies within the sphere kick in, the one that's being hard for this applicant. On the north side of the road, they don't occur. And actually, I was able to really eliminate that the county has approved any subdivisions or minor subdivisions in the sphere of influence in the last 5 years. There were 2 projects, though, that were approved. Roberts Ranch, down there off of Fairview. And that project was actually butted up right to the city with and the city's infrastructure, and was acted on by the city of Hollister and annexed into the city limits. That was Roberts Ranch. And it was started out as county property in the sphere of influence. But they got commitment to serve, and actually the city annexed that property. The other project that was also within the city's sphere, but on county land first, was the Chispa project up on Buena Vista. That was county land in the city sphere. Public services were extended to the property, and the city acted on it and incorporated it into their city limits. So with both those applications, the city limit line changed and wrapped around these subdivisions. And so I just wanted to share that. Where I did not have time in the last day is to look up every...
Chair?
I'm sorry?
Since you broke those open, let's talk about them for a second. So Chispa project over off of Buena Vista, they wanted that kind of density level there. That was good. It's a good area for it. It was up against a cemetery. There's a lot of other things involved, which is good planning in that area, as well as that already being pre-zoned and part of the phase for the city's general plan to be moving into that area. Roberts Ranch, well, if you take a look at all of that side of Fairview, it's all going to be annexed in the city. The church is maybe the only thing that will be left in the county, but they'll probably go in if it's a spot annex on that entire area. So those make total sense, but I think they're bad examples. Okay.
They were... I only qualify my response in that they were the only examples I found within that 5-year period.
Yeah, they did happen, but as far as this project and those projects, dissimilar.
I think, and that's part of the point, is that they're not the same. Those were consistent with the applicable rules, as I understand them.
Yeah, well, they just are what they are. And between now and back to 2013, the county adopted a general plan in 2015 that has this policy 9.8 within the sphere of influence.
And so
I don't know how much more we have to present, Mr. Felsen.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit?
So,
okay.
in other words, we felt those were consistent with the, but this one, however, again, shall cooperate to develop in an orderly and coherent manner. This just recounts the section of 2.2.4 of the MOU again. All wastewater shall be treated as central wastewater plant. So it's all about the public health, safety, and welfare, ultimately. The sphere of influence, additional requirements kick in, again, to preserve agricultural land, maximize efficient use of infrastructure, and preserve natural habitat. The Hollister urban area, has a single water system and wastewater treatment system. They're all trying to be in sync with each other, essentially, for a unified, coordinated system. And I think everybody's in the same boat in the county, whether city, county, or otherwise. We need to have a coordinated system, especially in the context of either historic droughts or climate change or whatever you prefer. But, it has been mentioned that, they just want to pay for pipes. Yes, I think that denser development has been shown empirically to, pay our way forward and create places that people really want to be. The point about putting them here near the city's edge and have agricultural land over here in this sweet spot in between is really valid, but it comes down to the design and whether the design of each project is consistent with the requirements within the sphere of influence. It's not that complicated, but we really need both city and applicants to work closely with us, because when they meet those criterion, we can meet these objectives of preserving ag land and maximizing the efficient use of infrastructure all over. This is everywhere in the general plan, and it's basically saying, please help pay for pipes with dense development.
All right, thank you.
In any case, just to quickly move along, you find that in the overall section of the land use element, and that's not even those 4 or 5 key ones, maybe 6. You find these land use policies, the circulation policies, the public utilities policies all contain elements that could be construed without reading into it, just looking at the straight ahead reading of these policies, that it's not really consistent with what's in the general plan. And again, we could go on, but we have work to get done. So there's the core general plan policies, and then there's at the large scale that we just went over, the ones that really determine whether it's going to work in sync with what the county has decided it wants to see happen there in the sphere of influence, to avoid, conflicts and redundancies, et cetera. But there are details too. We brought up some public comments from the property owner of the 12-acre parcel, which is currently running livestock on the west side of this property. And that's on the city side, and they're running livestock. And then you've got this proposal, and they're residential properties, single-family homes, modest homes on the east side.
So,
And
Mr. Felsing, if
yes,
I
sir.
could jump in again, great, thank you.
I'm just going to skip. We'll be quick. But
Okay,
Go
is
ahead.
that, these projects and parcels that are within the sphere, even the ones you felt might not have been relevant, they're still all guided by these policies of being within the sphere of influence. And I don't know how much more you had, but I did want to introduce that a letter from the applicant and a counter resolution was presented to the commission yesterday, and I'd like to speak to that before we turn it over to the applicant.
Okay. I'm right at the end, so with your forbearance and patience, commissioners, thank you. Essentially, what I want to get there is that there's a concern from the woman running livestock that there's not going to be any barrier in case kids want to get across into her property. And
Mr. Felsing, thank you very much.
All right.
We're going to.
Could I hear the rest of his presentation, please?
Yep, certainly.
Thank you.
So she was just concerned, but we were not able to get any commitments from the applicant at all in terms of, hey, recognize that concern, we'll be responsive to it and commit to building a certain kind of barrier. On the other side, the residents were just concerned about their quality of life. They had no idea what kind of impact it might have, so they wanted to know, and we weren't able to get a concrete response on that. And so I guess I just wanted to say that, it's how it all comes together. Even the very second one, Land Use Policy 1.2, this kind of compact cluster development patterns with a good street network will result in these unincorporated areas in preserving ag land, an economic power that comes with compact development, and preserving natural habitat ultimately. And again, this is the section under which you can approve or disapprove as you see fit. And we defer to your discretion and judgment, of course. So, in conclusion, staff recommends at this time the Planning Commission disapprove or deny major subdivision TSM 17-104, and there are some available options we'd be more than happy to go into. Thank you, Mr. Kinnison Brown.
So, not quite done.
Can I interrupt with?
No.
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 Mr. Felsing brought up the neighbor,
But,
and I'm the neighbor.
sir, well, you'll get a chance to speak. I got to add something real quick. He's talking about preserving the land and all that. The city's going to take over. It's going to be all residential. So I don't understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I know it was, we kind of got into a little
Yeah.
editorial, but planners, it's an interesting dichotomy in broad where if you have increased density in some places, you can have more open space in others versus sprawl. And so it was a little bit of a side tracking with that discussion here, so I understand the confusion. But I do want to, just for the record, to let you know that today about noon, I became aware of a letter that evidently you all received yesterday, previous, from our applicant. And have you all seen that letter, or were contacted with email and received that? If not, we can put a copy in front of you right now.
What's it look like?
Conditions and mitigations.
Yeah, so it's a letter from the applicant dated September 18th to the members of the Planning Commission. And it's an introduction to actually some meeting minutes, a selected starting point at 72 minutes in. And it's an offer of a resolution for approval with conditions of approval that have been submitted by the applicant. So staff became aware of that about six and a half hours ago. You all have had it for about 24 hours, I would understand. And as staff is looking through it, there's some characterizations in the front that staff did not follow your direction. We didn't come back from the mountain with an approval from the city. Your direction, if I recall directly, was to work with the city, bring the parties together, bring the applicant there, see what we can do. It's incumbent upon the applicant to demonstrate or modify their project to reach that. It's not incumbent upon county staff to selectively enforce or rewrite or, interpret in any way other than being as objective as they can county policies. The applicant was not successful with their proposal in getting that letter from the city. And so again, we followed your direction, and that's not really how the applicant's representative characterizes the moment. So I just wanted to iterate that. And if you see even county staff's resolution, we show that we've been to the hearings, we've been to the meeting, we've gotten the direction, we've tried to sit down and get folks to work together.
Okay, through the chair, also principal planner. The direction was to bring back all elements for disapproval or approval, whatever would be needed. That was your direction. It was given to you a couple of months, so that we missed 1 month and lost it. But the thing was is to simply come back and say, okay, you've already submitted your disapproval. We understand that. So on the next time, you come back with your disapproval and all the understandings of the disapproval, plus you also come back with whatever it would take to do an approval. What we were looking for was the commission making the decision instead of staff making the decision. And that looks like that's what's going on here. And your decisions are based on general plan ordinances and legal and a lot of other good stuff.
Those are recommendations.
Those are all recommendations. Our job is to sort of sort through the minutia and come up with real-life solutions to problems. And in some cases, the general plan is very flawed in a lot of areas. This is obviously one of them where it doesn't allow us any kind of a leadway, depending on how close or far away from the city limit line they are. That's kind of what the direction was. It was like, we already know we have a flawed general plan document that we should have been working on the last 7 years or so. But we haven't, so we're going to now have to hack through some of this stuff. So if this is one of the things we're going to have to hack through, then so be it. But your direction was bring the negative deck or whatever was needed in order for approval as well. So you'd have all documentation on both sides, and then the staff or then commission just decides which way to go, one way or the other, to deny or to approve. That was direction. Now, we didn't quite get there with this.
Well, I'm as a practitioner, I don't know how to make a determination of consistency with the policy 9.8. We do not have the letter of commitment from the service provider, and I'm not.
There's exceptions to every rule.
But
that's a problem.
I'm not supposed to, as a practitioner, as a planner, I don't think you want us practicing policy or making stuff up.
Well, yeah, but the way I look at the general plan, after sitting on 3 of them, is the general plan is a very dynamic document that can change some. It's not supposed to change a lot, but it's very dynamic. It grows and expands and reduces on its own. But that is actually based on actual real-life land use and issues that come up in the process. Okay, so this is one of those situations.
Yeah, and that's the language adopted by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
I get it, but what we did when we adopted that, okay, and there's a few of us in the room when that happened, when we adopted that it needed some changes in the process. So anyway, I hope that helps you with your direction.
I'd like to open a public hearing.
That's good.
So.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This time, hopefully, I can master the PowerPoint. So,
Where's the drive? Did it go in? It's in, but hold on. So, yeah, I just need to close his.
I also have a handout of my presentation just in case.
Really? Put it on the desktop. Put escape. He knows how to do it. Yeah. So I'm trying to close his first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yours?
Yeah. He's in there. There you go. Okay. Okay, so
You
you
just have to shrink it.
Yeah, I don't, can we take this toolbar off?
We'll give you about 5 minutes, and then you have a chance to rebuttal. So,
Well,
Plus or minus signs at the top.
There, let me, hold on. I'm just trying to get that sidebar off.
we'll go with the handout.
Yeah.
That works.
Is that good
There
or
you go.
zoomed in? You want it zoomed in?
I think that's probably
That's fine.
enough. And then how do you go forward?
So you just scroll.
No, I'm not going to scroll.
Scroll further.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Anthony Lombardo again. We were here 60 days ago, and I, like Commissioner Pierce, expected a very different outcome. The staff unfortunately ignored your direction and failed to bring back to you, we included in the minutes in our letter, of findings and a decision for approval, as well as their recommendation for denial. That's unfortunate, and again has required the applicant to submit what we hope you will adopt tonight, which are the findings for approval and the conditions of approval. I'm sorry to say that after almost an hour of the staff trying to justify their position, what they've given you is information which is inaccurate, and incomplete, and also legally incorrect. I'd like to briefly go over where we've been since we were here last. We went to a meeting with the city. We gave the city the offer of dry lining, requiring not trying to get the property owners to agree to annex, mandating that they annex. We cannot, just to make sure, I'm sure you all understand this, I don't need to tell you, but we cannot obtain sewer service from the city. It would be illegal because the city boundary of their sewer is not adjacent to our property. It would have to go through LAFCO, and the sphere of influence doesn't matter. The service area of the city would have to be amended, and to do that, you have to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act for growth-inducing effects of the expansion of the sewer line, which would extend 1,000 feet beyond the existing boundary past other vacant properties. We can't do that. It's not our obligation to do it, and the city has done nothing, as far as I can tell, in a long time to bring the sewer service further out. So we've done all we could do. We left that meeting thinking that the only thing the city was concerned about was how Meridian Road would be aligned. Our engineer, Ms. Hall, who's here tonight, offered to meet with the city to work out an alignment with the county. We never were called. Nobody ever asked us to go to a meeting to do that. The next thing we heard was we received a copy of a letter, not copied to us, a copy of a letter from the city to the water agency, Sunny Slope, asking them to withdraw their will serve letter. Nobody told us they wanted to do that. Nobody warned us. They just sent the letter. Well, the Sunny Slope held their hearing last night to consider the request to withdraw their canon will serve letter. The board unanimously rejected that request for the same reason that we hope you will reject the staff recommendation, that we're doing everything we can do to bring sewer service to this property. And unfortunately, no one from the city even bothered to show up last night. I drove from Salinas to go to that meeting. They held a public hearing and nobody showed up except me to speak on behalf of the applicant. We received the staff report late Friday afternoon, and as I mentioned earlier, the staff didn't follow your direction. Let me talk now about why the staff presentation is incorrect.
For clarification,
Sure.
Sunny Slope Water, I've got a letter from them. they're saying, yeah, that's fine, but they have conditions.
Right.
Okay, and that's the dry line.
The same conditions that we offered
Okay.
2 months ago, I think, at my last, when I mentioned that the last time. And
As long as we're clear.
Right, I reiterated that our willingness to do that last night. So this application, as you can see, for the first thing in my handout, was filed almost 15 months ago. State law gives the county basically 9 months within which to consider this application. So we're almost twice past the legal deadline to consider this application. As you can see, it was routed by the planning department, the planners at that time, to the Environmental Health Department and the City of Hollister. The Environmental Health Department of your county responded immediately, and as you can see from the second item in my handout, they said that they had no issue with this project being on a septic system as long as you met the requirements for septic tank installation and operation. Now let's talk about what is inaccurate and incorrect. Here is the general plan from the city, adopted in 2005, and they acknowledge that it's not up to them to determine what goes on in the county. They can offer their comments, but it's up to the county to decide what's done. In the San Benito County general plan, we have there are many policies, not just the one that Tavin mentioned. And at the end of my presentation, I'll show you why these are important. The minimum lot size described in the general plan for RDR says that they'll be 1 acre lots. It doesn't say they have to be connected to the sewer. It doesn't say they have to wait until there's sewer available. If you look at the zoning on the next page for the zoning designation for this property, the property is allowed to have 1 acre lots under the zoning. So this project is consistent with your general plan designation. It's consistent with your zoning designation. In fact, there's a specific policy in the zoning ordinance that says you don't do urban density development, as I mentioned last time, without sewer connection, and that means 1/2 acre per unit or less, which we are not. We also heard about the Hollister Urban Area Water and Wastewater Master Plan. I've also provided excerpts from page 4-6, which states that we are allowed to have septic tanks on lots that are 1 acre. That's the MOU to which the city and the county are signatories. So if that's not the regulation, what is the regulation for this area? In addition, the master plan goes on to state on page 4-4 that septic tanks can be used in the unincorporated area, and that on page 8-16 that the fact that existing homes use septic tanks is not a problem for the groundwater in the area, because in the future they will connect. It doesn't say they have to be connected before they're built. Now, specifically, a general plan, as sounds like Commissioner Pierce is painfully aware of, has dozens and dozens of policies. And there is, I would put it to you, and I would almost guarantee to you, that there is no development in any jurisdiction in the state of California that can be consistent with every policy contained in every general plan. For example, the policy that the staff showed you has to be considered in light of another policy. Policy PFS 5.5, that's in my handout, page 7-9 of your general plan, says that the county shall permit septic systems only when connection to an existing wastewater system is not reasonably available. So you have to balance the fact that it does allow septic systems because it is a sewer system, unlike the examples given by staff, which don't appear to be relevant to this. We're not on the city boundary. The sewer line isn't across the property line. They're not reasonably available. And the good news is the courts of the state of California have recognized this, and here's where the staff's analysis is legally flawed. A case of a couple of years ago called Napa Citizens for Honest Government versus Napa County Board of Supervisors, and the excerpt from that case is the second to last item in my handout, which says that, similarly to what the commissioners have already stated, that you look at the entirety of the project, how it fits in with the entirety of the plan, the entirety of the goals, including the Hollister Urban Area Plan, the general plan of the general plan of the county and its zoning, and then determine it's your decision to decide whether or not, on balance, project is consistent with those goals. And the court said, and what is most important for us tonight, is that a given project need not be in perfect conformity with every general plan policy. And so you can say that there's one policy that this doesn't fit very well in, but you can also say, well, they've done everything they can to conform to that policy, and at such time as the sewer service is available, they will connect. Because if you strictly had every policy had to be met to a T, you wouldn't have any development. I mean, you heard the planner earlier say, well, I want to talk about ag land preservation. What is that? If the policy for ag land preservation controlled in your residential zoning district, how would you have anything? I guess particularly troubling to my client, and it's the last thing in this packet, this drawing. Our project is outlined in a red rectangle, and the circular area that we've drawn north of our property shows the projects that have been approved since 2005. There are 21 homes on septic systems, and 2 subdivisions have been approved by the county in the last 2 years in that area, also on septic systems. Those are all inside of the Hollister Urban Area Master Plan. So I don't know, possibly the prior employees of the county had a different view of how you enforce master plans and how the policies applied. But it's certainly not fair to this applicant to say we approved all this development within the last 2 years, but now you can't be approved. So
let me address that for a sec, okay?
Sure.
So it's my understanding that the sphere goes right down the middle of Santa Ana Road.
Yes, I believe that's the case.
Anything on the north side with your circle area, that's
right,
not in the sphere.
Not in the sphere, but in the Hollister Urban Area
right.
Master Plan.
But the big deal sounds like the big deal tonight is all about the sphere and how you are within the sphere and then those issues within the sphere. So, yeah, thanks for the example, but I'm not sure it works as well in this particular.
So the Hollister Urban Area, which was the reason we were given last time, which is why we couldn't do this. Clearly, the policy and the history of this has not been such that the county has ever considered that to be an impediment to development. As I said, there's one policy that talks about having sewer service or requiring sewer service if you're inside the sphere of the city of Hollister. However, there's another policy that says you have to do it if it's reasonably available. Well, it's not reasonably available at this time. The city would have to take a lot of steps, including go through LAFCO to receive approval to expand their service area and prepare an environmental impact report because of the growth-inducing effects of sewer service. So I think, as the Commission mentioned last time, there's nothing's black and white in planning. It's degrees of gray. And so in this case, you find consistency with that policy based on the fact that we have done all we can. We will receive sewer service, but it's beyond our control how to get sewer service. It's within the control of the city. And I find it particularly disturbing that after we made those good faith offers at the city, without notice, a letter was sent to Sunny Slope saying, take away their water service. Cannon will serve letter. So thank you for your time, and here to answer any questions. Ms. Hall is here, the engineer for the project, and I'd like to save a few minutes for rebuttal afterwards. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Through your chair, is it your preference that we hear from all speakers and then hear from staff as rebuttal, or would you like a little
hear from all speakers?
Or would you like a little feedback at this time on this presentation?
Yeah, we'll do the public.
Okay.
Yep. And then the staff can
I do
rebuttal.
have
and the applicant also.
Okay, great. I think that's great. I do have material responses here, and I'll just add them up.
Okay.
Mr. Sidewalks?
Could you put that sphere, Richard? picture first, and might help people understand.
So, let's see.
And all speakers will have 3 minutes to talk on the matter.
Is it okay here? It's okay here? Okay. All right, so sphere of influence, right there?
Yeah,
works.
that's good. Okay, that's perfect. So, thank you very much. My name's Alex Sidewalks. If you look at that sphere of influence picture, my wife and I own the 3 parcels immediately to the south of the applicant's parcel and traveling west. You can see I have no objection to the discussion about sphere of influence, whether this project goes through or not. My only concern is the alignment of Meridian Avenue. If you look at that sphere of influence map, you'll see at the west end, Meridian Avenue is at the bottom of Barnes Lane, and that stub of Meridian at that point with its center line went through an irrevocable dedication which the county accepted, and the center line of that portion of Meridian lines up exactly with the center line of Meridian further west where you can see city development. The applicant's project had an approved tentative map for roughly the same sort of acreage back 30 years ago. And at that time, the Meridian Avenue there, they were going to put in a half street on the northern side of their southerly boundary, which was directly in line with the Meridian center line that's further to the west at the south end of Barnes Lane. That tentative map expired, and somewhere along the line in the next 5 or 10 years, the development to the east between the southeast corner of the applicant's project and Fairview Road was approved, but the Meridian center line of their development was offset by 180 feet roughly to the north. And so now we have a quandary as to how to connect the 2 existing portions of Meridian. And the objection I have is in the tentative map that's currently being presented. I sent a package in on June the 10th to make the June meeting. None of that is in any of the minutes. None of it was talked about today, although the person that's running sheep immediately to the west of the project, of the applicant's project, did get to have an entry in the discussion. So my solution or proposal is that at some point or other, the center lines of the 2 ends of Meridian have to be connected, and the proposal that the applicant has to wander 100 or 120 feet into my parcels to do a reverse S-bend doesn't make sense from a public safety issue. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Bailey?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bill Avra. I'm going to be presenting some information along the same lines here in just a moment, and I do not want to argue with Mr. Lombardo because I have the utmost respect for him, but I do want to make a few things clear to some of the statements that he made.
For the record, what's your title?
Do I have to say for the record? Yeah. Okay, I'm city manager at the City of Hollister. Okay. The City of Hollister doesn't necessarily extend sewer lines. That's not what we do. On occasion, we oversize sewer lines when the capacity is being met, but developers are the ones who extend sewer lines to projects that are being requested to connect to the city's system. In this particular case, the project is obviously in the sphere of influence. It is because it's in the Hollister urban area and water and wastewater project area, it's not any line that goes from our current system or to the terminus of our current system to the new system is not growth inducing because the HUWAMP programmatic EIR and the master plan itself already contemplates development at the levels and capacities in both of our current general plans, specifically in this particular area, the city of Hollister's general plan.
But it might be growth inducing to the north in the county.
But in the north, it would be contemplated at the county's general plan land use designations, just like Santana Ranch, for instance. It's on the other side of the city limits. It's actually outside of the sphere of influence. It still has been connected to our system. Other examples of projects that the commission has approved is Sunnyside Estates, Bennett Ranch. All of those projects are well outside of our sphere of influence, but yet you've required them to connect to our system because there is no other feasible way to do treatment of effluent. The whole idea way back when, and we'll talk a little bit more later, is that the protection of groundwater is important. The reason why that we haven't given this magical commitment letter, and it's not even something that we magically do, if you're in the area, you can't go anywhere else but to the treatment plant. So there's no such thing as a commitment letter. If they were applying for connection, we would absolutely grant them that. But that's not how the application came through. The application came through as a septic system in the HUWAMP area, relatively close to our sewer system. That is why we were requesting that they make the connection. And I think if anybody had, we can talk later. But I just wanted to make sure that's pretty much where we stand.
You're not getting off that easy.
I only have 27 seconds.
So, and so you're so within your time frame, but you're special, so we give you more time.
No, that's right.
So the other two things that we approved with saying that they had to hook up the city was simply because the sewer line was already in the street in the area. Okay, if the sewer line was down here in the middle of the street down here, we might be talking the same thing here. But
I would
we're
argue,
a long ways away from sewer.
Commissioner Pierce, that the Bennett Ranch subdivision sewer system is not necessary. Okay.
It's okay. He gets more time.
No, that's right.
No, finish that.
No, I think the line is in Southside Road, and I'm not exactly sure where is Bennett Ranch also on Southside? Because I know that there's a few out there that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. But I would also say this, is that even when the city of Hollister approves a project within its jurisdiction, for instance, the Creek Bridge Homes project, if you'll recall, they extended that sewer line 1,000 feet. We created a benefit area. Everybody else that connects to that line pays a fee, pays the developer back for that improvement. The county can do the very same thing. If you're making a condition that they connect, and you're making this particular developer put a new line in down Sunny Slope, you create a benefit area that basically says every parcel that's going to connect to that main pays back the developer for their investment. I mean, that's how those things work. I know Ann is fairly familiar with benefit areas, et cetera. So I don't want to take everybody's time, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Good information.
Todd?
Yeah, I'll decline to.
You'll decline? Poe?
Vice Chairman Rodriguez and fellow commissioners, my name's Co Cooper, and I've been a resident of San Benito County for the last 44 years. Germany is bordered by 9 countries, and the cry of the German people prior to starting 2 world wars was Lebensraum, and it simply means living space. They wanted out of the congestion that surrounded them. My family moved here from the Bay Area 44 years ago for the exact same reason that people do today, to have a little living space, to leave the congestion and have a place where parents and kids can grow a garden, and they can be exposed to agriculture through 4-H and FFA projects. It's what attracts people to our rural community. If we simply become another city like every other city, we lose the unique charm of San Benito. I believe this project should not only pass on its own merits, but be encouraged, as it will only enhance the quality of life for people here in our county. My second point also refers to vernacular phrases. We say things like at the end of the day, or the long and short of it, or that's the general plan. Well, that's exactly what this is, a general plan. It's meant to be revised, amended, and revisited, or even rewritten, as time and circumstance dictate. In American jurisprudence, we refer to the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. The general plan is akin to the spirit of the law. As Captain Barbosa said, think of it as a guideline. If you remember the first Pirates of the Caribbean. It is too encompassing of a document to not have flaws. Revisions are to be expected. In review, perhaps it's not wise to make a city's sphere of influence so large that a property can be held hostage for decades because it is nowhere near annexation or even the city limits. Maybe the next revision will consider a multi-stage sphere of influence, one that pertains first to properties contiguous to the city limits and is guided by time frames. My points are that these 1-acre lots are exactly what San Benito County is about, a space to actually live. And the general plan is meant to guide, not dictate. I tried to keep it under 3 minutes.
Thank you.
So we can take us out of that. That's my presentation. I don't know where the tentative map is.
You had it, you showed it.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just do this. We got it for you. Is it down here? There we go. There we go. Right there. Let's take it full screen too right away. From the current slide. There we go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ann Hall. I'm here on behalf of the client. I'm with San Benito Engineering, and I'm the engineer working on this project. I'd like to address a couple points that were brought up. One had to do with the road and how Meridian Street was being extended. And I think you can see on the plan here, as Mr. Sidewalk mentioned, unfortunately, in history, the two ends of Meridian do not line up. That something didn't happen right. They don't line up. There has to be a way to get them back to lining up. When this was initially submitted, we actually had a 90-degree bend in the Meridian, more of a to got it over to the property line sooner. But Meridian is an 84-foot right-of-way, and when it's listed in the city and in the county as I believe it's a collector. It's a larger street that's intended to be the main thoroughfare, and they did not want a 90-degree bend in it. And so the instruction was to follow the city's rules as far as radius, street radius, and start bending it back toward the other leg of Meridian, which is inside city limits. So that's what we've done. We've had to work with the limitations of what we have, which is Meridian Street on one side of the property, and then bending the road back toward Meridian Street. This was an attempt to get Mr. Sidewalk some amount of access, at least it touches the corner of his property, was the intent. Like I said, it went through a couple of reviews. I'm not sure there's, if the restriction against a 90-degree bend is still part of the recommendation, and I understand why it was, this is about all we can do for Meridian Street within the confines of the property. So that was the idea behind this. The other issue that has come up is obviously the sewer and how this connects to sewer. And in regard to the Hollister Urban Area Water and Wastewater Management Plan, I understand the goals there, and certainly to improve groundwater by reducing septic tanks. And that, I don't think anyone has an argument with that. When that was first passed, my understanding as an engineer was anyone inside that area automatically was already approved for sewer service. That was going to be, that sewer service, if you were in that area, you could get city sewer service. And The problem is there's been some different interpretation of how that works, and specifically when it comes to Bennett Ranch and Sunnyside Estates, the two that Bill mentioned, they are now approved to hook into the city sewer, but that was probably a 3 or 4 year battle, despite the fact that there was a sewer line right in front of the property, and I think that only happened because of a threatened lawsuit on behalf of Bennett. If I could just finish that statement.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is a disconnect between what the urban area water master plan is trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and how that's being interpreted through LAFCO. There is, I think, a bigger issue there that it needs some attention and it needs some direction as to how that's going to be dealt with on projects like this. But in the meantime, the physical reality of being able to, even if we requested out-of-district service at this point, it essentially stops this project for 3 years. And so I think the effort of a dry pipe and the deed restrictions are a truly good faith effort toward trying to meet halfway, given some of the realistic limitations that are in place right now. So, do you have any further questions for me?
No, thank you.
Yes, Ann. I was wondering the sumps that are required on each one of these properties, that looking at all the other developments that have been going on, these huge gaping wounds in the earth that are supposed to collect up our great stormwater, couldn't that be utilized better as like a rain barrel type of thing? There's a term for it, a subterranean water storage.
French drain?
Underground storage.
Yeah.
Cistern. Well, all projects obviously have to meet the state stormwater guidelines, and the county has guidelines which are actually pretty strict in regard to the amount of water you have to retain on your property. This particular subdivision was designed with individual stormwater retention ponds rather than one massive one for the whole subdivision, and that is probably, I mean, that's a pretty accepted standard in the county where you have the room to accommodate it. They're designed to be, they're not going to be like the 6 foot deep ones that you see in subdivisions coming into town. These are going to be in the order of 18 inches deep. So it's really going to be more like a shallow area on the property that the water is held in before it can continue on. If you do one combined pond, they tend to get quite a bit deeper. So the cistern is always an option people have, and it becomes more expensive. It can become, if people want to collect gray water and reuse it for gardening, there's those kind of options, and those typically can be implemented more on a house-by-house basis, because some people will want the maintenance associated with them, and some people won't. What we've proposed here is a relatively low maintenance type of way to address stormwater, but there's nothing preventing anybody from having a cistern or doing an underground system either. Does that answer what you're?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Bill?
Good evening. Yeah, my name is Bill Nicholson, and I've presented before you before, but I'm the executive officer from San Benito LAFCO, and I wanted to clarify the LAFCO process a little bit and the statements, like Ms. Hall just mentioned. Some of these projects have taken a while, but specifically the two that she referenced were outside the city's sphere of influence. So it's taken a lot of education for me to learn how things are done here, and a lot of education of our LAFCO commission on the LAFCO law. You're talking about general plan and zoning, but LAFCO has its own set of laws. And there's specific standards for giving services outside your jurisdiction, whether you're a city or the Sunny Slope District. LAFCO can't approve an extension of service outside your jurisdiction's boundary And the first example is within the sphere of influence of your boundary. That means you're ultimately an area you're going to annex and make it part of your boundary. LAFCO can approve that if there's an anticipation of a future annexation. So that means this area, for example, is in the City of Hollister's sphere of influence. The city's general plan intends that they're going to annex everything. LAFCO could approve a sewer extension or a water extension if the city was providing water to this property in anticipation of a future annexation. That's achieved by an agreement between the city and the landowner that gets recorded, and it happens all the time. The two other projects that were referenced, Deutscher and Brigantino, both had to sign these agreements. And that's the point when the city is ready to annex, the landowners can't stop it. They can't protest. And you may be familiar with protest of neighbors on small lots that are next to new development, and they get dragged in by LAFCO to not have another island, and they don't want to come in. But in this case, in return for getting sewer, which is a huge value, you give up your right to protest annexations later, and at some point that land would be in the city. So that's a very different situation than when you're outside the sphere of influence, as on South Side Road. And those developers, sure, they wanted city sewer because the line was right there, but the city hadn't ever planned to develop that area. It wasn't part of their growth. So that was a hard part for LAFCO, because outside the sphere, you're only supposed to approve sewer or water extension for an emergency. And that means there's somebody already there and your well went bad or your septic failed. So a special arrangement had to be made for those two projects. But this is a typical arrangement. It's not that difficult. Santana Ranch, just east of this, further out, had city sewer extended to it, and it was outside the city's sphere of influence. And it happened at a time when everybody thought you didn't need to come to LAFCO, and that was a mistake. The Hollister urban area does not exempt you from going to LAFCO, and the LAFCO Commission voted on that, and that's the law now, and it actually follows the state law. So this project's within the sphere, and there is a path to provide sewer through LAFCO without a whole lot of red tape compared to these other projects that were referenced. So I'm available to answer any questions.
Yeah. Question. So this is I thought you could not provide government services, city government services, outside of the city limit line. For water, they can't. The city can't. But you can actually end up running a sewer line down Santa Ana Road and attach into this project with LAFCO approval without a problem, and within a time frame of
reasonable time frame, right?
What's reasonable to you and what's reasonable to me and what's reasonable to the developer are all different reasonables.
Yeah.
So what time period would that be?
It would probably be a matter of months, 2 or 3 months probably. Okay. The key is how are you going to get it there? And I think the issue is more about the money than it is about LAFCO being an obstructionist. And I just wanted to get that out here for the Commission's information that LAFCO, this is something common for LAFCOs to approve an extension of services within your sphere. That's the difference. It's an area plan for the city, and really what we're talking about tonight is arguing over timing. The city was going to get to build out their sphere at some point, and you don't develop it all overnight, and so it's a matter of how soon do you develop it. And one way to do that is to get to the far end extreme of it earlier by extending sewer before you can annex. Mm-hmm. And why aren't you going to annex? Because you're not contiguous. And LAFCO, state law, requires that you've got to be next door to the city to annex. You can't annex a piece far off, and that's this property. So how do you develop it at city densities with city services? And there is a path to do that. So the problem is the landowner has already made a lot of investment into doing 1 acre lots. It was a common practice in the past. And again, there's another issue there is, do you want 1 acre lots in the city sphere, or does the county allow them outside the city sphere and provide land for it in a lower density setting? And that's one of the other rubs here is you're in the sphere, so doing low density is really contrary to what the city's doing. And LAFCO, we're neutral. We're not part of the city or the county. So we're looking at, in the city side, what do you do? And in the county side, what do you do? And the South Side Road was unique. It should have been lower density, but the city sewer was there. So it found a way to get that approved. And on this one, you're in the sphere, so it would be more likely that you would use the city services.
Yeah, but the likelihood of an annexation in that area is decades.
Well, Mr. Sidewalks would probably be disappointed in that because he's working with the city on an annexation to annex or a project to annex his property. And if you looked at the map, he's right next to this property.
Is he contiguous?
He's contiguous to the city on the southeast, and his property would be making a connection to the current property if his project gets annexed. And he's proposing sewer, as I understand, for his project at higher density. So the sewer would be coming over there, and I think the city manager was referencing how you do these zones of benefit. If you put these projects all together and you add hundreds of lots, something becomes more feasible than a standalone project by itself, saying, hey,
Understood.
why am I doing it? There's other things going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I got it. I used to sit on LAFCO too.
Okay.
Okay, so you've opened up quite a can of worms a bit. So, okay, something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. No.
Nope.
No.
Would you like to speak?
Sure. I'm Ingrid Sidewalk, and you heard my husband speak earlier. I'd like to bring attention again to the way the road lines up at the bottom of our 40 acres. And we have, there's a...
Could I help you?
No.
Okay.
No, you've had your 3 minutes. Sit down, Mr. Sidewalk.
Well, my question is...
No, you can't speak off the record. You can't speak off the record.
Okay. Honey.
Okay, let your wife speak.
Okay. My concern is they've had several attempts to make the two ends of the road meet up. And each time they're making the road meet up, going deeper and deeper into our land without any discussion with us. We've called everyone here. We've visited Mr. Stotler's office in Los Altos, which was closed. We've tried to speak with him. I'm sure we've talked to Ann. She's been our engineer over the past 30-some years, San Benito Engineering. We've also put calls into Mr. Lombardo, and he has not been able to speak with us. Maybe, I'm sorry, I got your name wrong. So we have reached out to try to resolve this road, which has now taken quite a bit of our land, and no one has bothered to talk to us about it, asked us to meet, returned any calls, and also we've sent certified letters back in June, and nothing. And this is a big property grab, and no one has talked to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more?
Any more speakers?
Okay.
Okay. The public hearing be closed. You want to rebuttal?
Please.
Okay. We gave him an opportunity, and county will get an opportunity too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anthony Lombardo. Possibly San Benito County's fortunate it doesn't have people that object to growth and development. But when we were here last time, there was a bunch of neighbors who didn't really want urban density development next to them. And I suspect, as you recall, the city in its previous correspondence said they wanted 8 units to the acre on this property. Now we're hearing that all they want to do is provide a sewer service. Well, the policies that I sent you out of the Hollister urban area master plan says a septic tank is just fine on a 1 acre lot. It's 24. It's not 1,000 square feet. I misspoke before. It's 2,400 linear feet from that existing sewer line, according to Ann, to our property. And as Commissioner Pierce pointed out, I'm sorry to say that you do have to consider growth-inducing impacts when you're taking sewer service into an unsewered area. And you can't do that in 3 months. I mean, I applaud the LAFCO executive director for his optimism, but we couldn't even get this to hearing in 15 months in front of this commission. So you have to comply with CEQA. There may be, obviously, apparently, from what someone said earlier, Mr. Sidewalk has a very high-density project that he is planning or proposing to the city, which would connect to the sewer line. I mean, I don't know how the judges in San Benito view CEQA, but I know from trying a couple of cases here that the ones I came in front of took it very seriously, and I don't think you can just look the other way and pretend like we don't have to worry about what happens when you extend the sewer service area. The city has 10 years of uncommitted growth on the books already. So this property was put into the sphere of influence over 20 years ago. I don't know when the sphere is going to be reconsidered, but based on the type of development that's around it that has been approved by the county already, it doesn't appear that this area is appropriate to be included in the sphere in the future, because this is more rural density development consistent with the general plan of the city at 1 acre lots or larger. In closing, Mr. Chairman, the court case that I cited to you is controlling here. You don't pick one policy out of the general plan and say, well, you don't comply with that one, so therefore we don't have an approval. You have to look at the overall goals and policies and objectives of the plan. In this case, of course, the sewer is to protect groundwater. The County Environmental Health Division has not said this would be a groundwater issue. The Hollister Urban Area Plan says it's just fine. It's not going to contaminate the groundwater. And our groundwater level is, I believe, 50 or 60 feet below the surface, which means that our effluent is never going to make that groundwater no matter what. And we've done everything we can to offer to connect when it's available. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tavern.
Well, I think that was very informative to have the series of speakers and what they've brought to the discussion, because I think when we've had several questions raised, we've had others bring information and kind of answer those. But I do wish to speak to Mr. Lombardo's presentation and his first presentation. There were, I would say, selected excerpts from the code used and stuff, used and items. The idea about no development can meet all policies anywhere ever. It might be, it might sound daunting, but in the case of, 9.8 here, the county general plan here is land use goal 9, directly speaking to how the county is supposed to treat the city fringe area, and has no less than 9 policies here that give the county direction, give applicants direction on what's expected, the coordination, the encouragement, the expected high densities, and then yes, one of those has very strong language with the black and white, shall get a commitment of service. One of the other statements earlier, drawing from the Hollister Urban Area final EIR, was also selective in what was presented to you, and an incomplete sentence from the documentation here. So let me have. I'm going to try not to do it out of context myself here. But this service area boundary change would extend beyond the city's existing city limits and sphere of influence. Without this service area amendment, this is speaking to the Hollister urban area, without the service area amendment, new development in the HUA outside the city's existing service area would utilize septic systems. That's where he put a period. The sentence continues, systems which can contaminate groundwater and are considered a risk to public health. That's the rest of the sentence. And this document, and as explained by others, is, HUA, whether it's awkward or whether it hasn't been implemented in the county's general plan all that effectively, was for groundwater protection, wastewater treatment, and it's tied all into agriculture and blending waters and keeping jobs and having people safe. So no one's here to debate, the reasons for the plant or why dirty water needs to be treated well. But that was a very selective presentation on that point. And I think Mr. Bill Nicholson from LAFCO also spoke to the difference between some of those South County subdivisions and how they may have been extended service. One was the affordable housing project and then other people wanted to get to the line, but there were different reasons. This project is within the sphere of influence of which LAFCO has a provision for, hey, it looks like it's going to be within your jurisdiction at one point, so we can, so the extension of such service is expected and anticipated. So I don't want to go into everything, but Mr. Sidewalk had his concerns with Meridian, of which, that would be in the context of approval if we needed to discuss more about that alignment. The city manager spoke and reiterated that the applicant has not, applied to extend the pipe. And we've also heard, probably due to the expense. It's 2,400 feet down the road, but it is an option available to the applicant to make that request of the city.
May I add something before you get too far?
Yeah, I don't see myself going much farther here because I'd love to hear your conversation.
The housing department doesn't find any problems with the septic system, but contamination or anything like that. There's no.
Yeah.
And you're saying.
Well, as we looked at this project, location, right? The county does approve 1 acre lots with mutual water systems and septic and stormwater detention systems. And we do that, and people propose that, and we approve them. We get the roads to standards. We see that it's got proof of access, potable water, soils that are able to percolate. This one happens to be in the line, in the sphere, of which there are additional criteria, many additional things. So that's location in real estate. And so, I'm not to create policy, but to go forward.
I'll give you a new one with real estate. It's called conformity. And 160 units next to 1 acre parcels is non-conforming to the typical use of the area. But let's address, you've got, how many gazillion? We could throw the map back up there and look at all the other septic tanks that are in the area. This is the way their guidelines are set up. They're saying, hey, look, we're going to force all of the people by here to hook up later. But also, if I remember right, I asked for a condition of no water softener loop and no water softeners. So these septic systems will be the cleanest in the area until they're ready to hook up, until the city moves out there, and then they connect to the sewer system. Because let's face it, the big problem here, not just nitrates, it's salt in the groundwater. And that's the big deal. That's why we're abandoning water softener systems, telling the people that they need to get rid of them. We probably should have, a point of sale ordinance so we can monitor that, and my realtor friends will kill me. But this I see is probably a subdivision with septic tanks that's going to be cleaner than any other one we have around right now. Yeah. And they've also said, yeah, we're going to hook up. And they're far enough out to where they could be decades away from annexation. But the city's working on a new general plan. I see them going out Southside Road, Union Road, all of that area, and saying this is our new sphere, and taking in all of Lico and all of that area out there, because that's the kind of the way their growth is going in that direction, and on the other side of Fairview a little bit. So this could be an abandoned sphere that we're talking about here.
So through the chair, just my final little moment. So staff, we cannot make the findings to recommend approval, as we've said numerous times here. So staff's recommendation is for denial. The 3 bullets that follow here on page 3 of 6 of your staff report, it says, if denied, the applicant, and this is not a staff recommendation necessarily, our recommendation was for denial, but available to the applicant. If denied, the applicant may, among other things, appeal the matter to the San Benito County Board of Supervisors, apply to amend county general plan policies, work with neighboring property owners and the city of Hollister to jointly address the provision of sewer utilities and consider annexation. And as a property owner trying to get value out of the property, if they left with a denial, they've probably got another 4 or 5 bullets themselves that they would bring to their options. So staff's not saying that any of this is easy. I mean, it's all heavy lifting. That's true, but the applicant has points of redress that they can engage.
Public close. Any questions, commissioners?
So let's, I know you want to move to a vote, but a little further discussion. So
We're at discussion.
we make a motion to move to approve. Because we haven't really gone that direction and talked about this at all. So we make a motion to approve tentative map tonight. So what does that set up? Okay, they basically already had an EIR and a negative deck, correct? Based on the septic tanks. Environmental impact, for the record, environmental impact reports.
There was there was a CEQA initial study that was circulated, and during the public review process, information came to light on how insufficient it was and how the project was inconsistent with goals and policies of the general plan. The document was not presented to you because it was insufficient, and I've never asked you to act upon that document.
Okay.
That would need to be, to get to an approval, you would need an environmental document that has been prepared according to CEQA, that is not insufficient, dots the I's and even policy compliance, and would need to be done. But if you wanted to move to approval, or you were directing staff to return at some point, what evidence would we bring to bear that we could bolster making the findings for some of those required subdivision findings? So that it's not a
some of the negatives.
Commissioner
Go ahead,
Pierce,
Pat.
I'm sorry. Could I just ask a question? I want to
You
make sure
bet.
I'm
Jump in.
following this conversation. Do I understand what you're saying? If the commission would tonight say bring back approval, the next step for you would to have a CEQA document to verify that. So are you saying at that point that you would require an EIR? What are you talking about CEQA what would you require?
What would I require? It's the project here in staff. This is staff's opinion and recommendation. It's not a creative writing exercise in how to just write the words to approve this project as it's drawn. The exercise is to find project changes or letters of commitment, which is our hang-up on the policy side of things, which has a connection into the CEQA document. So even if you said EIR, right, this policy, they're inconsistent, it's going to be significant unavoidable impact with the land use and policy section of the CEQA document. You can't really override that. You can do a whole EIR and come back a year later and you're still inconsistent with that policy, with the general plan, which according to subdivision findings, is grounds for disapproval.
I understand that. That's what I'm saying. Are you telling the Planning Commission that there is no way to get, in your opinion, there is no way to get over the CEQA hurdle?
Well, if you wanted to entertain a condition that the project gets its connection to the city sewer prior to approval or something like that, I mean, we could entertain those things. We've heard testimony that that they believe that the environmental documentation on growth inducing is already written into some of these other documents. I have not, like the HUA and those things, I haven't vetted that for my own self. But if you...
Question. Pat, can I take it for a sec? Okay, so if we took the connection to the city sewer, or their commitment letter, and they get it by the time as a condition of the final map. So now we approve the project, and one of the conditions at the end at the final map is they do have a commitment from LAFCO that city will hook up.
Commitment from the service provider.
When and if the time occurs. Because we're still not annexed. See, that's the big problem here.
All right,
I
so
mean,
I'm
all for it. Tell the city, tell Bill, went over here, annex that whole area, Bill. We're done. You know, it's all taken care of. But that isn't going to happen for decades.
And if I could, well, while the land use policy 9.8 says get the commitment from the service provider, our service provider, the service provider in this situation, the city, is considering many more things than just groundwater and septic. They're thinking density, parks, commitment, how are we going to pay for fire and police services when this later becomes ours. They've got a whole slew of concerns, but the commitment here, the language here is get the commitment from them. So I don't know where it's going to go.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Certainly.
5-minute break?
Sure.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Getting old, you have to do bathroom break.
back with the negative.
Name, I'm sorry, Scott? Is it Scott? Okay. I just have a couple of questions. This is a small project. I'm in favor of small projects in the county specifically because in most cases they use local contractors, subcontractors, paint, all of the jobs that this fulfills. So my question to you is, what contractors, subcontractors, and like that are you going to use?
I've already talked to Kirk Nicholson regarding the improvements. I've got a couple other people around here that I know do underground as well. I've already talked to I'm reached out to. I'm going to be using local people down here. Okay. That's for sure.
Okay.
And I would like to bring. I mean, since I'm here, to extend the sewer all the way down to our property, for what it takes to get it there. Not only is it going to take quite a bit of time to go through the process, even if regarding LAFCO, I mean, if the sewer were already there, we would build smaller lots if that's something that we thought would be something that would be the path of least resistance, However, to extend that sewer down there, the cost of getting all that done at this point and the time that it takes, I would not have a choice but to ask for a higher density project to make it affordable to even do that. At the same time, not to mention the loss of time, but also I've talked to the neighbors behind this property, and they do not want even half-acre lots. They said, look, we have 1-acre lots. We do not want to see higher density there. And I know people in Hollister, and the thing that they complain about the most is the high density and the traffic up 25. I just don't see this area being annexed in my lifetime. And this is a project that I'm taking on, and it's tight. It's my retirement. I've worked very hard to pick up a piece of property towards the end where I can do what I know how to do. And I tied this property knowing that initially meeting with county staff 2 years ago almost, it was back in May or April when I first met with them before we submitted. And they said, look, this is pretty straightforward. You're consistent with the zoning. You're complying with everything. It doesn't look like it's going to be a difficult project. So anyway, here we are, 2 years later after picking up the property.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, I was wondering, the property to the right, as I'm looking at it here, those are all 1-acre lots?
Yes, to the right.
And the other question I had is about joining Meridian. That I see here on this colored map, the line that was proposed to go through to connect Meridian, and the property owner, her complaint about the swath that it would take out of her property. I'm seeing this line jog over as down in the bottom section here, and that why it couldn't go in an S shape, because there's is that another property line that is that little jog here? That if this were put in an S shape, that it would come on and equally divide or be an equal burden to the adjacent property.
That'll be a street engineer to figure that one out. Ann would.
Ann?
Ann, she has a question for you.
Go ahead.
I apologize. Could you repeat the question, Valerie?
Yes. When it comes to this diagram of the street, now, is that a property line there?
Yes, at the very bottom. Yes.
So it jogs over.
You were trying to go through this to get back to the map, Richard.
Try again. I want to do it this way a little easier.
Thanks.
I'm just trying to address the concern of that property owner, because it seems to me that they do have an argument.
Right, and I think, so you're asking about down here in the corner?
Yes.
And so this bottom line, it's not quite on the picture, but that bottom line is their property line. And I think what they're asking is that this road be straightened out a little bit so that it doesn't dive as much into their property, is my understanding. And I don't have an issue with that. I think our thought was to give them, by touching their property, it gave them some access to the road. If we unbend it slightly, for the lack of a better term, unbend it slightly so that the ultimate road doesn't dive into their property as much, we can do that. But it would it wouldn't touch their property anymore, so there wouldn't be any partial access. But we can do that.
Yeah, that was obvious.
What I'm going to do is give it away and house this property.
Mr. Sidewalk, can you take your seat, please? You're carrying an off-the-record conversation.
Exactly. Thank you.
So if you're saying...
So it would seem to me that...
Have less of a curve in this area?
The road could take equal
equal damage to the properties on each side of that line. If that's a property line there, why make the road come down through this if one could make more of an S curve here and bring it straight through that property?
We can't make it through that. We cannot get it straightened out by the time it gets to Mr. Sidewalks' property. There's a limitation on the curve we can use in there. Given the speed limits and the width of that road, we're limited to a 600-foot curve going through there, which is what we've used. What we can do is, so what happens is, you're right. Right now, it would go straight. We start the curve. To make it to Mr. Sidewalks' property, then it dives back down and has to come up to straighten out to go to Meridian. The other alternative would be to keep it straighter and just do an S curve that goes straight to Meridian. And we can do that. What it doesn't do is touch Mr. Sidewalks' property at this point. It would touch the neighboring property to the north of him, but it would allow, as the future Meridian builds, for it to be more of an S curve that just goes straight into the existing Meridian. So if pulling that curve up, so to speak, away from the bottom property line is helpful, that is something we can do, but we can't make the curve tighter without causing other problems in terms of the road geometry. But we can make it so it doesn't dive down into their property.
Yeah, it would be nice if a little reconciliation could happen so that you have property owners adjacent. It's brutal to have something developed next to you and have no say when it comes to impinging on your property. And, that's, I think, worthy of looking
Sure. And I don't think, like I said, I think that's something that can be accommodated without any real opposition from the applicant. And we can make that a little more, less of a tight curve or less of a one that, like you said, dive bombs into the property. So we can pull that back.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Lo?
Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners, this has been one of the most frustrating projects I have ever dealt with. It's 20 units. To me, after the conversation about CEQA, one avenue to us, obviously, is to deny the project and let the applicant go before the Board of Supervisors on appeal. I don't feel right in doing that because I really feel that I want to approve this project. I truthfully don't see a reason not to approve it. But I also understand there's a memorandum of understanding, which I totally support. I understand what they're talking about with benefit areas, with the dry pipe. There's a lot of variables here. But I really believe that the Planning Commission at this point does not have the ability to direct staff to move forward because of their feeling about CEQA, which is, that's their feeling and that's their job. I've never heard of this done before, but I would like to send this to the Board of Supervisors, basically with no decision from this Planning Commission, because it seems like we can't approve it, and I won't vote to deny it. So, Council, is that a possibility?
I think it would have to be denied first by the Planning Commission, then the applicant could appeal. Without the denial, it's just stuck in limbo.
All right, but if we don't want to deny it, I don't see an avenue at this time to approve it. Is that correct?
May I suggest, I believe...
through your questions, your queries, and where you're at right now, your point of thought. Staff has come here with recommendation of denial, but I believe you're wanting to honor, I heard that HUA, the wastewater,
Right.
and try to get to approval in some sense. So I've heard in other jurisdictions I've worked in that, hey, we have a motion of intent to approve, and here's some conditions we may want to add, or even findings and evidence. Maybe one of those conditions is prior to final map, at least connection to the wastewater sewer. That would protect your HUA. The HUA services. It still involves work on the applicant. He's going to have to explore the cost of providing that, and getting the backfill. Backfill expenses.
But instead of connecting with a letter of intent that said that they're okay with it and the applicant's okay with the connection in future time, would that satisfy the MOU?
A letter of intent from who?
From LAFCO, from city, from applicant that said that they understand that they're going to connect up in the future and everyone's okay with it, but it's just...
With all respect, I'm not sure
I know
that's
I'm
different.
stretching.
That's where we're at.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know what's new there. That's what we've been trying to get in the trenches with, is to get that letter of intent. Now, as you saw, the language from the Sunny Slope, they said in the spirit of the HUA, we want to provide water conditionally, that they do connect to sewer, and we would accept, and they're a signer to the HUA,
right,
accept septic for a temporary period.
But they also
but
said,
the other provider is not coming forth with such a letter.
But they never said that the only way they would accept it. They said they would accept the dry pipe.
It was as conditional intent or something. What's the
dry pipe
with a dry line
and the deed restriction that said that they would hook up if and when annexation was to occur.
Yeah,
and that's more reasonable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's going on up here. Is we're looking at the spirit and the logic of the situation, the conformity, and everyone else is kind of looking. Staff is not that it's a bad thing, but you're looking at the limitations you're under. What I'm looking at is like a variance to.
Don't say GP.
The general plan, we have a flawed general plan.
Well,
we need to have it fixed.
Certainly, the Planning Commission could direct staff to, explore general plan amendments if you want, so that you change that document and the project's measured against it. It's all heavy lifting.
Yeah, but how do we approve these guys and let them move forward, knowing that eventually, maybe by the time they get ready to pound nails or something, this will be worked out?
With all my years of experience, that's where I like to work and get people is, hey, how do we get your project shaped in consistency with the general plan? You get what you want, the community's vision is realized and not counter. That's my prime goal, is to work that way. How can these things all live together? I haven't been able to get there on this one. I would have been.
Okay, then how about an approval that says we do approve, and we'll put it on task on you to come back next meeting with all of the reasons that we can approve it. And you can just change your mindset and say, if I had to approve it and I had no other choice, this is the direction I would go. Now, maybe it's complicated, but at least we'd have that other part that we give direction to do anyway, that said if you're going to approve, these are sort of the hit list that you have to do.
Did you want to share some of those with me?
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me.
We're going to go on with this for the next 5 meetings. I see no other alternative but to send it to the Board of Supervisors.
Me too, but I don't want to deny either.
I'm not. There's got to be another way we can send it.
Well, we can just try. We can try the court system and just go ahead and send it to them and see if it works.
Counsel.
Well, the county code lays out nine findings that any one of them, if found negative, is fatal to the project, and requires denial. The staff report has several of them where they're in the negative, where the findings cannot be made. So I don't see how you could approve the project.
we can override the planning, if my understanding as being commissioners. Yes. Yeah, we have a lot more power than the planning department gives us, because I've been advised. So, on the last meeting we had, which was 2 months ago, they were going to put the dry line with the laterals, and the city was going to accept that. And they were going to have a meeting, and then I saw a letter come to the Sunny Slope Water for them to, the city asking them to pull their approval for their service. And then I knew that Sunny Slope was not going to do that. Okay, so Sunny Slope Water is tied into the city, and they're all into agreement. But this goes on Southside Road. When they put that sewer line into Southside Road, to do that development was for future development. All those people that are going in front there are having 2 years, and since we approved projects, they haven't got started. There's no sewer line in this area at all. It's 2,400 square linear feet, which is shy of half a mile. I mean, the planning department wants the owner to put that line in. Have you looked at the costs, digging up the road?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's pretty costly. So we have to find a way to approve this project and override the planning. So I think we have to get a motion done, something on there, and let them put in the dry sewer line, the laterals to the property. And when the city gets near there, or have a deed restriction that all the property owners have to hook up, not wait till the sewer system fails. Because the sewer system can last forever.
The septic system?
Yeah. I lived out in the county. A non-conforming lot that I grew up in was 8,000 square feet. I still own the property. I moved in there over 40-something years ago. Sewer line's still working. Sewer septic system's still working. So this way, we don't wait till the system fails. As soon as the city's in there, they hook up. No buts or ifs. Either we make the developer pay for some fees now, so they don't, because I don't know what they're going to be at the time. It could be 30 years from now. I think Southside Project's been over 20-something years that they put that low-income housing up there. Nothing has happened on that area. Just meeting after meeting after meeting, go back, bring new engineer plans, do another environmental. It's just continuous. We have to, and I agree with the city. They want to move that way. The gentleman wants to do high density. Great. That'll be the.
May I explore a question with you?
Go ahead.
All right. So, if you're moving towards approval, directing an approval, it sounds like you would want this mechanism, this deed restriction, to be written in such a way that truly obligates the future property owner to make the connection, to spend, spend the money and do that.
Correct.
So that would be us exploring the right, tight language and mechanism that would be attached to some kind of approval map. Am I understanding that?
That's one. No softener loop.
Okay.
That's the other, because that's the main contaminant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand staff.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Are you talking about the dry pipe and the deed restriction, or are you talking about actually running the pipe and making them hook up to city services?
Well, there was both there, and the rhetorical was
the dry pipe.
Boy, don't you know how expensive that is? So with your direction to find a path to approval,
put in the dry
you need
line.
to know if it includes, maybe a suggestion that prior to final map, you put the sewer service pipe in the ground, or craft language like you've been sharing right there, which is.
Okay, Sunny Slope water.
Or is it both?
Requires these things. They have to be in there, and that's the deed restriction, the dry line, and all that. So those conditions, because otherwise they don't get water, right? Yeah. So those are top of the list. To go in.
So not to be a stick in the mud, and I'm not trying to be, but 3 parties to that MOU, right? Mm-hmm. One you have a letter from the Sunny Slope Water District. There's 4 parties now. But there's the water provider, and they've given a letter of conditional commitment. We don't have such one from the city. And then we're the county. We're the other people that say we'll obligate, we'll be in conformance with the HUA. So,
all we need to do is get Billy up here to agree.
Mr. Chair. The memorandum, I was on the board when we signed that memorandum of understanding. I am very familiar with that memorandum of understanding, but that was signed many years ago, and it probably didn't take into, and I know it didn't take into consideration all of these different nuances. Maybe the memorandum of understanding needs to be relooked at and looked at specifically. That was an overview of, just to save the water, the groundwater. And it was done very simply in very simplistic terms. I think this should go back to the Board of Supervisors and let them look at the memorandum of understanding. Maybe that needs to be changed.
That MOU also had each of the parties agreeing to go back to their respective jurisdictions and reshape their policies in the guiding spirit of the HUA, which basically has the growth-inducing sewer in all that county area, even outside the city.
Right.
And it hasn't been done.
And it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
And that was, 16 years ago? It was a long time ago.
So, would this help at all? So, if we overlaid a PUD, the planned unit development overlay on top of this, which essentially says anything we're doing within this is compliant only to the project itself, and it doesn't spill over into the rest of that area, would that be helpful? Because you can go outside
the
of
applicant's
zoning.
probably going, oh my gosh, a PUD is effectively a zone change application, and that would
well, it's just an overlay, though. It's a subzoning
that would
change.
reset the project significantly.
Right. But, I'm just looking for ways so we can get an approval here. So if that would be one avenue of allowing that, and everyone was comfortable that this was not going to set a precedence for the entire urban sphere area, I'm okay with that, depending on if it's a timely thing. In the city, behind Kmart, we built some houses, and we set up a PUD in that area, and the lot sizes were non-conforming to any zoning at all. We had to use the PUD in order to allow this inconsistent lot size to be allowed. But it's the only place in the city right now. They're moving their code towards that. But it's the only place in the city where that would be allowable, but it only was allowable because it was a PUD. So I'm kind of taking that and trying to work it out to the county sphere and say, does it still jive and does it still make sense? But I'm for approval on this because I was involved in the general plan. I know that the general plan has got some serious issues with it and it needs to be fixed. It hasn't been fixed because we didn't have staff and we didn't have the money. But that shouldn't stop and penalize just because the county messed up. Shouldn't be a penalty to the developer or the applicant.
Yeah, so let me be clear here where I was giving you that vacant look and I don't know how to get here, et cetera, with the approval. I've done the best I can to recommend how I see it. You are the planning commission. You are the directors. You get to bring more to your decision making than I as a technician just looking at the black and white. And so, whatever your motion, if it's a motion of intent to approve, obviously that's a semi-continuance, but it's to go to do the work to bring back a resolution that you can act on that has the nuts and bolts, the groundwater protections or other things that I believe you're wanting. county council and, other administrators will advise me a little better on, general plan policies, but, you are the planning commission.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
And whether you...
Ms. Lowe, you have a question?
No.
So-
I'm ready for a motion.
So, do I hear a motion for someone?
I would move that we move forward with the intent to approve and ask staff to come back with the necessary findings and conditions. Can you do that by the next meeting, or do you need 2 months?
Ooh.
Yeah. Next
You can be
meeting.
done.
If you make it next meeting, I'll second it.
Did we move the next meeting to March earlier when I was here? No.
I'm pretty sure it can be done.
October.
I would rather do 2 months than have it come back incomplete.
This
in
is
a
what
month.
we're September.
There's
October,
not that
November.
much to be done.
To November meeting?
It's just a wording.
Well, you got
The
your
legality
sequel.
wording. I mean, that's all it is.
All right, then I will move that it comes back at our October meeting.
And I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What's that date, please?
October.
October 17th.
Thank you. Sorry.
As long as you're not yelling at us, obscenities and all that. Yeah.
No, sir, I would never do that.
I'm sorry, was there a vote?
17.
There was a
Turn
second.
the air conditioning off.
There was a second, but
Yes,
there was a
but- Right, Pierce.
vote coming?
Mr. Pierce seconded it, is that?
Right, is there a vote coming?
We voted.
Oh, you did?
We voted for it.
All approved.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So are we done here?
No. So Billy sat here all this time.
Final approval for this project?
It-
Mr. Rodriguez, yes?
It's going to come next month for final approval.
Thank you.
With the conditions that they're going to work on.
Yeah, item number 2.
Okay.
So is if Bill's still here, we're going to need to go to item number 2, which we should have heard first. But
Right.
Now, item number 2.
But we wanted to make Bill suffer.
Yeah.
Well, I did.
Sorry, Bill. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, we're not done yet. We got to go back to item 2 now.
Yeah.
Yes. You ready, Bill? Item number 2?
Yeah.
Question, is it more painful here than the city? It is, huh?
No comment. Can I just? Sorry, I'm dumb. Was that on TV?
Where's your
I
sticker?
don't. Do we have a? Is it on the? Is it on the? Is it right behind it? This one? This one?
Is Angela Love still here? Angela Love? Oh, that would be Lombardo.
Yeah, that would be the lady.
All right, they left, yeah.
Okay, I lost item 2.
Okay.
It's on the MOU, right?
It'll be on anything and everything that you want to speak about.
There's one page.
So I'm my name is Bill Avery. I'm the city manager with the city of Hollister, and I was sort of asked or offered to provide sort of a brief overview of sort of the Hollister Urban Area Water and Wastewater Management Plan as it exists, and sort of how it relates to some of the things that are going on. I can make this a lot shorter now. I understand it's getting a little bit later in the evening, so let me see if I can. How do I get to the next slide? Oops. Forgive me if I'm going to paraphrase a lot of the things that happened. I'm just going to try to move through this as quickly as possible. In 2002, the city of Hollister's received a cease and desist order or a building moratorium from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. First, because there was a breach in the levee that spilled some effluent into the river, and at the same time that the Regional Water Quality Control Board believed that we were over capacity at that particular plant. I believe capacity limitations at that time was about 2.3 million gallons per day. So that's what that treatment plant was processing. Around the same time, we had members of the San Benito County Water District and the County of San Benito, specifically at that time was a gentleman by the name of John Gregg, who was the executive director at the Water District, and Rob Mendiola, who was the director of the planning department with the County of San Benito. Those two gentlemen are important because they played a pretty integral role on how we came to the future and where we are right now. It's also important to know that Rob Mendiola, was also the LAFCO executive director at that time. And historically, the planning director for the planning department within the County of San Benito has acted in that capacity until we went with Bob Braitman and now Bill Nicholson. Those are critical elements to kind of this story. Originally, we started going down the path of building a new treatment plant to meet Regional Water Quality Control Board standards and the state of California's standards for treatment. We went to a completely new process, an MBR process, and that plant was originally scheduled to be about $25 million, and the redevelopment agency was going to be participating again because we had zero development in the community, and we were really feeling the effects at that time. As time went on, we developed the governance committee, and that is sort of where the MOU sort of stemmed from, the original MOU, which included at that time just the San Benito County Water District, the County of San Benito, and the City of Hollister. And the goal at that point then was to create this regional plant. And the regional plant was supposed to treat all of the effluent that was developed in a particular area within the City of Hollister's. I'll use urban service area, even though we don't really use that term anymore at that time. A few years later, we were able to get Sunny Slope County Water District on board, so that was where the four parties or the four members sort of became united in this effort. At that time, about that time, we started to look at this Hollister Urban Area Water and Wastewater Management Program. And what you see on the map here is essentially everything with the exception of Ridgemark was going to be come to the regional plant. And as I mentioned real briefly in my last little 3 minutes was in order to sort of size the capacity of the plant, we had to use our general plan, the county's general plan, to determine densities and capacities so that we can size the plant appropriately. So what we have right now currently, just real briefly on the wastewater treatment facility, I don't know if anybody's actually been out to the facility. If anybody wants to go, please feel free. You can give me a call and I'll give you a tour. It's actually kind of cool. I'm not going to lie.
Smelly, right?
It's not, doesn't smell at all. That's the amazing thing. So we have capacity at that plant, permitted capacity. And when I say permitted capacity, that's what the Regional Water Quality Control Board will allow us to treat at 4.5 million gallons per day. We are still roughly at about 2.3 million gallons. Oddly enough, even though we've had some development and new uses that are going into that plant, conservation measures and some of the other things have contributed to the fact that we're not seeing a huge spike in the amount of water that we're treating every single day. One of the things, as a side note to that, one of the things that the city was able to do about 3 years ago is we went to a different kind of processing train. That train actually ends up being quite a bit more efficient than our older trains that were now 8, 10 years old now. So capacity right now is projected to be somewhere around 6.5 million gallons per day. We don't have permit authorization to do that, but that's what the plant capacity is right now. And as you know, the plant can also be mirrored. We can add additional trains. The whole idea was to get that plant to about 18 million gallons per day. Again, keeping in mind that right now we're at about 2.3. So we have about 3 times the capacity that we are required right now available to us at the wastewater treatment plant. Why that's sort of important is this, is because we all made a commitment. And when I say we, I mean everybody, made a commitment that let me back up. So the ultimate cost of that particular plant was projected to come in at $120 million. It actually came in at about 105. So the community, and when I say the community, I mean the ratepayers for the city of Hollister, had to adopt new rates because you can't bond and or borrow money based on future development. However, based on the 2.3 and the 4.5 million gallon capacity, about 48% of that plant was based for new development. But that new development capacity was born on the backs of ratepayers. I know I'm one because I live in the city of Hollister, right? And so what we recognized, or what we saw in 2006, 7, 8, 9, are huge increases in our sewer bills. Right? Now, we got to a point in 2010 where we were making our debt service, and we did not have to raise our sewer bills. We were collecting a pretty hefty amount in our impact fee money to take care of the other portion. We went through a refinance a few years ago. We got very lucky on rates. So we were able to we paid down a big portion. We defeased a big portion of it. And then what ultimately that led to is just, a couple months ago, we were able to reduce our monthly rates. We never actually got to the total rates that were approved by the 218 process. We stopped at about $86.10, and now I think we've taken off $6. Not much, but nevertheless, how many utilities actually go down. So we didn't have a rate increase from 2010 to 2018. In 2018, we actually reduced our amounts, and that's all because we were able to have new development and new ratepayers. So this is the part that I want everybody to sort of remember and focus. I don't want to necessarily talk about the past project, but every ratepayer helps us maintain our low rates, regardless if it's right now or in 10 years. The reality is that everybody who's building a home and connecting to our plant is assisting all of us who bore all that cost associated with the plant way back when. And I think that's one of the key components that we need to remember from our constituents. In addition to the HUWAMP and the effluent side of things, as you know, we also just recently completed the West Hills treatment plant. So the supply part of our program and the treated part of our program is now melded together, right? We have good clean water coming through West Hills and portions of it through less salt. We are in the process now of people should start to see that on a regular basis, especially during the summer. Even the bubbles in the far-reaching parts of the community should be seeing new water. And then, as you can see, we're almost completed with the crosstown pipeline, which will connect the rest of Sunny Slopes water system to the West Hills project. So those folks will also be seeing a benefit from that project. Again, the reason why it's important is that's good, clean water that goes into our facility, cleaner. It's a much better product coming out of it. And then when we use it on our ag, the San Benito County Water District then provides that water to some farmers, et cetera. They have a holding storage pond out there, which then they sell that water. So a couple things happen there. One is now we're reusing our water twice. We're recharging our groundwater basin immensely, and so overall it's a really good program. And I think that the reason why it's a really good program is because that area that you see that's shaded is exactly what's supposed to be treated by our plant. Going back to why it was important to understand that, say, Rob Mendiola and those folks were LAFCO executives, is because I'm hoping to God that the governance committee and the jurisdictions didn't make the city of Hollister build a plant that was 3 times the size that they needed, right, if they weren't going to make people connect or make a decision on whether they were going to connect. I went to the LAFCO in 2010, and I said, okay, we're done with this. LAFCO adopted a resolution that basically said, yes, everybody's going to connect. You don't need to go to outside jurisdiction request. If you're in the area, you're going to connect because there is no other alternative. In your CEQA documents, there was not supposed to be another evaluation of effluent treatment other than connecting to the city of Hollister's wastewater treatment plant, right? There was some question about that. Bob Braitman made us do something different. I believe it was in 2012. We did another resolution to LAFCO and said, adopt this resolution identifying and approving that map so that, again, politically, this is where I was starting to feel the tension, is that I did not want to have that be a political issue. This was an overall community health and safety issue, right? We didn't want there to be policies or political decisions based on who was going to connect, who was not going to connect. Again, that's based on the fact that we had people in the county's planning department running LAFCO, and I think we were all on the same page. That was the intent. I don't think anybody meant to do anything wrong, but now we've had two other executive directors that are reading or interpreting the law differently, which is absolutely okay, and making people go through the out of jurisdiction process or the annexation without protest process. I think that that's all well and good. We shouldn't have an issue with that, but we also shouldn't have this be a plan. LAFCO shouldn't be used as a planning tool to restrict growth or development either in the sphere of influence or out of the sphere of influence. And that's what it has become. So that's one of the most disappointing things to me, is that us as a community kind of have forgotten what the overall goal was in this particular thing. We were able to, Bill Nicholson was able to sort of get us in a room and talk about a potential alternative. I mentioned the projects off the South Side Road and that whole area. Well, Sunny Slope County Water District expanded their district or annexed some of that area into their water district, right? They could have done both, but because of the MOU and trying to stay genuine to the process, they did not annex that extra area to provide sewer, because they recognized that the agreement was everything was supposed to go to the regional plant. So they elected not to do the sewer component, but they did do the water component. And what we ultimately ended up doing, I think, with county council and Bill's recommendation, or maybe it was Bob, it may have been Bob before Bill, basically said the city and Sunny Slope should enter into another MOU that basically says, look, Sunny Slope County Water District could technically serve a sewer treatment process for this area if it wanted to, but it's electing not to, and therefore it gave its right to the city of Hollister. Okay, so that's how some of those things have evolved. I think that there's still some question on how legal that is, but I think that it's all part of the same story, in that, again, you have a huge development, east of Fairview, outside the city, outside the sphere, that is 100% being connected to the city's plant. You have Riverview Estates and all the properties that are kind of going in and tying into that line. You have some other properties north of Buena Vista that are making the request of outside jurisdiction, and you're having maybe a request from the city to make the folks do it on Santa Ana. We are going through the process of changing our sphere of influence and annexing what I call inside the circle. So if you look at the bypass and the curve, everything in that curve, all that property is being annexed into the city at one time. So there are such things as these mass planning applications for annexations. We're just now completing that. We'll probably get most of the applications to LAFCO here over to Bill in the next couple of weeks or so. So I can probably leave it at that. You're probably tired of hearing about it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me now or ask me whenever you would like. I wasn't always there, but I was in the periphery for quite some time. I understand the financing part of it more than the other part, because that's the part that I was sort of in charge of. But so that's it in a nutshell.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
Say you was in the city or around the county, city and county. Now, will the city provide water without annexation?
We are allowed to serve water without annexation in health and safety situations, serious health and safety issues. Again, that's very specific as part of the LAFCO state law. as part of any annexation, obviously on our side of I call it our side of Memorial, because essentially, for those that don't know, basically the two districts, one side is Memorial, the other side is our side. So Sunny Slope is east of Memorial. Hollister basically provides west of Memorial.
How do you identify health issues or seriously?
Health and safety. The most typical, Chairman, the most typical way to address that is we have folks on wells that end up being high in nitrates, and that's a serious health and safety concern. So generally, those folks are the folks that we hit immediately. I can't remember the most recent one we've done, but the one that comes to mind is there was a Frank Borelli property north of Buena Vista who had a couple of dwelling units that were on a well that ended up being high in nitrates, and they are now being served by the city of Hollister's water, not necessarily annexed, but their water is being served by us.
When I sat on city planning, we allowed attachment out there by his property because he had a contaminated well. It's a case-by-case basis. But I think LAFCO specifically says that you can't run government water over a city limit line for a subdivision project of any size. It's just illegal. Is that true?
I would say I'm not really necessarily up on my LAFCO law. I don't think it would be fair for me to answer that question. I would say that cities are different than special districts. I believe that's true. Bill could probably knock me on the head if I'm saying something absolutely wrong. So that's why Sunny Slope County Water District, as true just a water purveyor, is allowed to cross jurisdictional lines and annex things into their district. The city of Hollister generally does not do that. And LAFCO is in charge of making sure that we don't poach each other, right? So it's all about customer bases, not necessarily for the city of Hollister, but most of the time special districts are about providing service to a customer. That's not to throw Sunny Slope under the bus. I didn't mean to do that. I was just saying.
Yeah. I don't want to go into tonight's project.
Yeah, okay.
But,
stay away.
Does the city have plans, I guess, to run pipes into different areas, or will it only happen as development happens and then the developers will be responsible?
Yeah, the city of Hollister, if I may have said it earlier, or if I didn't say it earlier, any new line or extension of line is always done by a developer. The city of Hollister does not identify parcels or areas specifically to run lines to. The lines that we are most normally recognized for fixing or doing is lines that are currently existing that either have a capacity issue, are broken, or we run parallel lines, usually just for capacity. Nothing that the city necessarily does is for capacity issues or for future development.
Could a developer have a benefit area, and then just run the piping and then obviously be reimbursed?
Yes, we do that on a pretty regular basis, and again, I think in order to sort of keep things in perspective, I would say this: the reason why a sphere of influence line exists is supposedly there has been an MSA done, which is a municipal MSR, a municipal services review, which identifies areas that the city or special districts can actually serve. And although, and that's what sort of kind of creates the sphere of influence. A sphere of influence shouldn't be identified as something that's way out in the middle of it, nowhere. 2,400 feet, I don't even know it was that far, but let's just say it's 2,400 feet. 2,400 feet in development world is not very far. What LAFCO and urban sprawl was trying to prevent is those projects that are a mile out or 2 miles out, 5 miles out. Within a sphere of influence, I'd be hard pressed to find somebody that would say that that's sprawl. If it wouldn't be in the sphere, or it wouldn't be sort of identified to be a future to annex property if it was way outside of a normal service area.
Okay, are you saying then that anything in the sphere of influence would not be considered sprawl?
Personally, I would say that that's absolutely a true statement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, would it be wise for the city to put in the line and then charge developers to hook up?
never happened.
Yeah, we don't. Again, we don't. We are not in the business of putting in lines for future development. That is what happens is the developer puts in the lines, and then they deed them over to us, and then we actually, we are in charge then of the maintenance of that line. We obviously they dedicate the land, or if we're doing new streets, et cetera. So through the dedication of the roads, we end up receiving ownership of the water and the sewer and the storm and everything else that goes along with that. And again, that was one of the critical comments for us. And I hope the Planning Commission will consider these in the future. Is that every new development that comes into the city of Hollister is required to go into several community facilities districts to pay for police and fire, to pay for the maintenance of roads and landscape areas or sound walls, et cetera. And they're getting pretty excessive and expensive because that's what it takes to maintain our city. We don't necessarily get a lot of the property tax share. Everybody knows that story. So we have to make that up somewhere. And so when we have development that, whether it's annexed now or annexed in 20 years, those are actually burdens on the city of Hollister. I mean, we don't necessarily want 20, 40, 80, even 80 homes to come into the city of Hollister if they're not actually paying for the services that we ultimately end up providing them. And I think that the county would be a good idea for the county to be implementing. I think you guys do CSAs. I think those need to be annexed into CSAs, just so that the county can cover their costs for the service of at least the police protection part during that period of time that it's within your jurisdiction.
Can I?
Go ahead.
If a project is annexed after it's been built, you cannot go back. Can you go back by a vote of the homeowners and put it into?
And ask them to take a vote to be annexed into a district?
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's ever gone down that path because I think that it would be sort of. I don't think we would we would succeed. The last one that we did was El Cerro. El Cerro Drive was the last annexation of properties that were currently in the county that were developed, and it was sort of a forced annexation deal because LAFCO law also basically says that we're not supposed to be creating islands through annexations. So if we're annexing a series of properties and it happens to be adjacent to a developed property in the county, but it creates an island, that island by law, even though it pains me to do it, it comes into the city, and now those are city properties. But those properties are generally on septic. There's no curb, gutter, sidewalk. It's not developed to the same standards as the city of Hollister, so those end up becoming a problem. And the city doesn't necessarily get much of the benefit, again, from a property tax perspective, to maintain or service those individual properties.
But if that property is in the county and it's in a CSA.
Oh, if that's transferable?
Yes.
So we've talked about this, Commissioner Lowe. We believe that there is language that can be put into a CSA or a community facilities district that says that this agreement shall be assigned to any future jurisdiction upon annexation. So I will honestly say that I don't have a legal opinion from an attorney that says that we can do that, but I haven't heard an attorney say that an assignment can't happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, and piggybacking on that, so it could be reassigned, but can it also be reevaluated price-wise?
I would
so
say
that
yeah.
both those languages should be in play.
I believe the answer to that, Commissioner Pierce, would be no. The formula that establishes the district is very specific. So you're going to start with a baseline of X, and you're going to have some sort of inflator every year in perpetuity, and I think that we would be held on that assignment to those terms. Otherwise, I think a citizen could easily come out and say that's something new and that's something that we didn't agree to.
Yeah, but you'll have that inflator.
We have an inflator. Yes,
Yeah,
all of our we blew it in 1992 with one that was a 20-year deal, and it did not have an inflator. But now everyone that we've done since has an index related to either CPI or the engineering news record, depending on the type of community facilities district that it is.
So you're a budget guy, okay? So
no, I'm really. Oh, I'm horrible.
I just elevated you. So you're a budget guy.
I'm not an anything guy. I'll be honest with you.
So 1 acre parceling a nice house in a 1 acre parcel, say out in that area somewhere that we weren't talking about, those are going to be like $700,000-$800,000 homes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're going to generate a heck of a lot more property tax. And so now it's sort of like density compares to non-density, higher value, less value, but more of them. If you take that area in, wouldn't the additional property tax help to carry them along? Because you provide less services for them, you have less impact for them, and you have higher property tax for them. Sounds like a win-win-win for you.
Explain just the way you explain it. Yeah, if obviously the larger the value of the home or the resale of the home, the more, even though it's a small piece, the more money that we would get from that home. Providing service to one home is different than providing service to 5 homes or 6 homes or 8 homes, whatever the number you want to use. But there's other benefits that come along with developing at that level.
Right.
So it's because most of our revenue, I don't know if you know this, but I may be off a little bit, but the magnitude doesn't really matter. We only generate about $1 million, maybe $1.2 million on property tax per year. We have a $22 million general fund budget. Our sales tax is the only way we survive. So I never count on development. The only thing development does for us is offer a potential customer to buy stuff at Target or buy fuel. That's why I always say, please, whatever you do, don't buy gas at Costco. Please buy fuel here. It really makes a huge difference to this community. So the property tax thing is really pretty negligible to us.
All we need to do is widen 25 and we'll have it drilled.
Sure.
Attract more business in town.
Mm-hmm.
Or that too.
Help support the local business.
But a lot of business won't come in until we have the population. Catch-22, right?
Double-edged sword.
Well, yeah, most businesses and commercial entities will tell you that in order for them to come here, they need rooftops and they need a workforce that is knowledgeable. I mean, those are the things that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis. I think we have some more projects coming to our commission on the 28th of this month. Panera Bread and some of the other things that are going over at Hollister Farms, where I think we're starting. We're really close to getting that hump where people are going to want to come here rather than us begging them to be here. So
close.
But you're not going to soak them on the impact fees, are you?
What's that?
Impact fees for those new business or new developments. I'm talking about what happened with what was that? Lowe's.
Lowe's?
Yeah, back when was it? 2000 would come in here.
Mm-hmm.
I think the city wanted to charge them $1 million for sewer.
Oh, yeah. So, and that has been fixed. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think so. What the chairman is referring to is that our former sewer impact fees, our initial impact fee schedule was based on square footage of buildings. Rather than another method. And so one of the things that was interesting when we were calculating Lowe's, for instance, I think it was close to $1 million. It was like $800,000, but really it was 16 water closets. And so that's been addressed a long time ago. We fixed that right away.
Okay.
Yeah, no. And now we with. yeah. So
they were going to be gold-plated.
Yeah, no. I mean, we recognize that big box stores and things of that nature, that was just an inequity. And you know what? It's not necessarily something that the city would have had to fix. A smart developer or Lowe's would have caught on to that right away and realized that, look, our equivalent dwelling unit equivalent is nowhere near $800,000. So like I did say, though, our impact fees have been reduced dramatically when it comes to the sewer impact fee portion. What used to be a little over $14,000 is now just over $4,000. Again, that's as a result of the development that has occurred, our ability to defease a lot of the bonds, our ability to pay, and then also the fact that we're trying to make it a little bit more reasonable and only charge a developer for the cost that it actually is. I mean, that's the one thing that we sometimes tend to forget as development regulators is that impact fees are very strict. You can only collect what you're spending. You have to have a serious nexus study to validate those things. So when we were reducing our fees on the ratepayers, we had to actually reduce our rates as well on the impact situation, because it wasn't the same as it was 10 years ago. So clear as mud.
Yeah, good job.
All right. Any other questions? I hope this was helpful a little bit. I think sometimes it just helps to be reminded of sort of where we were. Again, I always believe that the intent by all three agencies and the community was to have a regional facility. I don't think, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, put it on everybody to make sure that we weren't creating batch plants or these other sort of facilities that caused them issues. The Cielo Vista batch plant is a problem. There's some others that are not great. So hopefully we can take care of them someday as well. So.
They can hook up now. Or
they'll be able to, if they want to, they'll be able to. That was the other thing that we've always said, is that the city's not necessarily going to be in a position to force anybody, but we don't believe that they're going to get a discharge permit many more times unless they do. I think there's going to be some interesting conversations with Sunny Slope once again, and I think that there's going to be some interesting conversations when we talk about the subdivisions at San Juan Oaks. Again, another project where we've sort of, there's not going to be a letter laying around that says you can do this, but we've agreed in concept that absolutely you're going to be connecting to our treatment plant. And the reason why we did that is when Sunny Slope County Water District decided to make their improvements to their facility several years ago, rather than at that time connecting to the city, we were just swapping those capacities, right? Because everything that we had done to that point was evaluating taking the Ridgemark facility offline and bringing it to the city of Hollister. When the district took their action and vote to go ahead and make the improvements to their facility and not connect to us, is when it just so happens shortly thereafter, San Juan Oaks came knocking on the door and said, "Hey, will you be able to service us?" And we said, "Absolutely. These 2,000 homes aren't coming. If you want your 2,000 homes on, we'll be more than happy to do it." Again, it's all about capacity. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have 4.5 million gallon plant when we're still only processing 2.3. So there's that story.
How many homes would it take per million gallons, Bill?
It's getting less and less because obviously consumption on a residence now is we're doing really well here. The folks at the San Benito County Water District will applaud everybody for their efforts, even Sunny Slope, about the amount of water that we're using per household or per person now. But I always just say, we can basically double the size of what we're doing right now. So that's 10,000 units of residential plus all the commercial and industrial that we have in the city of Hollister that is basically coming to the plant before we have to do anything. Then keep in mind that we could probably do another city of Hollister just with a simple permit process from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, all with just the infrastructure that we have in place right now. So we're probably talking 40 or 50 years, and we're guessing that as technology changes, it's not likely that we're ever going to have to make any real concrete changes at the facility. We'll be able to just modify what we're doing, plus the amount of water that people are using, and whatnot. So.
I'm thinking one of the technology changes is going to be flying cars to bypass highways.
That could be it too. So.
That's going to be a problem.
Yep.
Any other questions? Bill, thank you. Oh, you have a question? I'm sorry.
I started about, 4 or 5 years ago. I started like a trifecta of San Juan planning, city planning, and county planning. And we get together as groups.
Sure.
You're at a few. So this kind of information at that kind of a group for all of us to talk about in sphere areas and things like that would be really informative and I think helpful. So city planners know kind of where we're going and what we're doing, and we know a little bit about what their mindset is. And maybe they learn a little bit about CEQA, which is all done in your general plan and EIRs and all that kind of stuff. So I'd like to encourage, the city to stay on board with that and then try to bring in informational speakers like you, to really sit down and educate, because there's a lot of new planners coming on. And there's a lot of information that they haven't been exposed to.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think those are very informative, and I think they're very helpful. I think the other thing is as I heard you mention earlier, we're about to embark in another general plan update ourselves. One of the things that we talked about with the county's general plan, and why sometimes these guys are at a huge disadvantage because they haven't been here, and making sure that your general plan at least references the Hookup to some extent. And so if you are going to change policies, us as practitioners, we don't really care what the policy is as long as we're all playing on by the same rules at the same time. So I would encourage that, if this planning commission wants to change some of the policies in their general plan, they run that up to the flagpole and get it to the Board of Supervisors and have them make those amendments, because it is important for us to all sort of at least know what the expectation is. So. Good.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? No?
Maybe a motion.
Maybe a motion.
Or do we have
adjourn?
any department head? Okay. So I motion we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, aye.
That's why I always plan my hamburger before.